Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Telford Wrekin Council Planning Committee. Please can all attendees ensure they've entered their car registration number into the iPad on entry that's downstairs in order to avoid a parking ticket. In light of the recent guidance from the government, it is asked that where you can to wear a face mask during the meeting. Face masks can be removed whilst you are speaking. This evening's meeting is held in public to ensure that all those interested and involved in the planning applications can see and hear how the decisions are made. It's important that the speaker are able to present their information without interruption and that the council members of the committee are able to hear and consider the material presented. Only those people who have been notified are able to speak. I would ask everyone else to remain quiet, not to interrupt the meeting and to allow the members to make their decisions. I remind everyone that council meetings can be photographed or recorded and ask all participants to recognise the importance of the planning process and please let everyone silence or turn off their mobile phones. Hey, Jem. Right. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence.
Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Jackie Loveridge and Councillor Gemma Offland as substitute and Councillor Janice Jones and Councillor Kuldip Soto as substitute.
Thank you. No other. Any declarations of interest in the agenda? No? None notified, Jane? No. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Sorry.
So I just realised that the two applications in my ward were discussed at my St George's and Prisley Parish Council where I was a member, but my declaration is that I take no part in those discussions nor took part in any voting on it.
Thank you, Ian. That will be noted. Right, the minutes of the 17th of November 2021. Are they true and correct record? Yeah. All those in favour? Take it to 2 at the end are as well. The minutes of the 24th of November 2021. Are they true and correct record? Yeah. All agreed then? Thank you. Item 4, deferred or withdrawn applications?
There are none, Chair.
None, okay. Item 5, site visits?
There are none proposed yet, Chair.
None proposed yet. That's ominous. Right. Item 6, plan application for determination. I intend to take them in this order. 0871 is the first one, it's Holy Trinity Academy. Then the former builder's yard at Barrack Lane, Lillishall, that's 0637. Then the land at north east of Sturch Interchange, Nedge Hill, that's 1056. Then 25 Palmer Avenue at 0684. And finally, Highgrove Meadows. Okay? Right. Holy Trinity Academy.
Thank you, Chair. This full application has been submitted by Telford Wrekin Council for extensions and alterations to the Holy Trinity Academy Secondary School in Prisley and comprises 5 elements, which are 1. A proposed standalone teaching block along with changing room facilities. The teaching block will be 3 stories high and be constructed in red brick and white cladding to match the existing school. The block is intended to cater for up to additional 300 pupils and 24 members of staff. 2. The extension of the existing school building to provide single-storey dining room extensions, again materials to match the existing school. 3. The conversion of an existing grass pitch into a 3G pitch with associated fencing and floodlighting. Fencing will be 4.5 metre high ball stop fencing and floodlighting will consist of 6 15 metre high masts. 4. The enclosure of existing sports pitches in the open space to the west of the school with 2.4 metre high metal mesh fencing and gates. This area as existing includes space for 2 football pitches, cricket pitch and running track. And finally, the creation of a mini soccer pitch in the northern part of the open space, also to the west of the school. Just for clarity, that pitch will remain unfenced. The application is subject to a calling request from Councillor Veronica Fletcher and also that application is subject to a financial contribution of £10,000 towards potential traffic restriction orders in the vicinity of the school. Officer's recommendation is that members grant delegated authority to the Development Management Service Delivery Manager to grant planning permission subject to conditions, informatives and a signed memo of understanding.
Thank you. I've got 4 speakers on this one. Councillor Robert Cadman from the Parish Council, please. No? No. Councillor Veronica Fletcher, the ward member then, for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This application presents the committee. Children need school places. The public need green spaces for their health and well-being. Prisley has been growing for decades. Their school places are needed. This was not addressed in the 2013 application, which failed to provide places for building schools for the future, reduced from 1,200 to 900 places. Now we are reaping the problems from that ill-thought-out provision. Residents are angry, hurt and disillusioned at the proposal to fence off the green space that has been used for the last 34 years I have lived in Prisley and in that time before of Telford Development Corporation. The only green space is sized for physical activities for adults and children, which has been enjoyed through at least 3 generations. Play area, mugger, benches for enjoyment of the area, dog walking, exercise, ball games and unsupervised games, etc. This will be lost if application is approved. This site is green guarantee. The 5x5 pitch is a mitigation for Sport England's objection to building on the school sport pitch. Who will use this? The school? The public? Not in the report. No plan for upkeep of the pitch and who will be responsible and pay for it. See 610. The extra traffic generated will have further adverse effect on the local residents on Tees Drive and roads off Pitchford Drive, Gough Close and Cooper Close, who cannot easily access or egress their properties at peak times. Prisley Avenue is already a nightmare to travel at peak times, and the roads off are similarly adversely affected and will exacerbate the situation as predicted in 2013. Heavy traffic bus route, buses to schools, drivers parking in bus space, parking on green verges despite double yellow lines, and using Prisley as a rat run compounds the problem. The pupils trying to cross the road is a road safety problem. There is no safety crossing. To access the bus stop outside the co-op, pupils have to cross the road twice as there is no link to the footpath turning left from Tees Drive to Prisley Avenue. A barrier prevents this. Phase 2 safety measures must be put in place. Phase 1 was completed in 2019 on Prisley Avenue. Light pollution and noise levels from the 3G pitch in the school grounds will have an impact on surrounding homes of the Red Road development. The metre fence, the 1.8 metre fence will be provided, but noise levels can rise and still have an impact on surrounding area. On the classrooms, 6/8 reports post-construction noise assessment to be carried out. What effect will this have on the pupils' education, on their health and well-being? Conditions of 2013. Conditions re-exist in community use. There is nothing on file or record mentioned in the report a number of times. What is the agreement stated in the report? The health and well-being of all our residents and children will be affected by the loss of green guaranteed space. The extra traffic and fumes from the cars stuck in traffic jams will greatly affect everyone. Thank you.
Robert Cadman, Mr. David John, then, please.
3 minutes.
Okay. This statement has been prepared by David Johns and Paul Thomas to ensure that the reasons behind the 500 objections are clear and properly considered by the committee when making their decision. We recognise more school places are required to meet the needs of an expanded population and for the school to safeguard the pupils, but object to the erection of a 2.4 metre high fence around the playing fields. The reasons are non-compliance with Council Policy NE3, LPA Report Paragraph 8.5. The LPA accepts erecting a fence will result in loss of free access to this green space used extensively by families and other groups for community activities. Future activity will be restricted to paid-for sport only, mainly football. The proposal fails to meet 3 of the 4 NE3 policy requirements for the Council to support this change in use and can only support it if it secures wider benefits which outweigh the disadvantages. Safeguarding Paragraph 8.8. When the school was opened, it was planned that pitches would be shared with the public. The school cites historic conflict with user groups, dog fouling and antisocial behaviour as reasons why they stopped using the pitch. In contrast, other user sports teams and groups share the use of the fields on a regular basis out of school hours without conflict or safeguarding issues. The school should have engaged with the community, which it is part of, to clarify and reinforce the terms of use of the fields. Additional measures such as clear signage could have been installed and would have been respected by the local community. It did not, and the school and the council expect to solve a perceived problem by building a 2.4 metre high fence and taking away free community use. There are other potential solutions, but these would need no discussion with the council and school, who refused to acknowledge a request from our MP, Lucy Allen, for a meeting. Maintenance, paragraph 8.9. Pitches can be well maintained with or without a fence, so this cannot be considered a benefit. Merits and benefits, paragraph 8.10. The LPA recognises the significant level objection. However, the merits used to justify the proposal could all be achieved without a fence through a better working relationship with all stakeholders. This would enhance the school's image within the community, which should not be underestimated. The 5v5 pitch, paragraph 8.13. The addition of this pitch is baffling and contradicts the reasoning used to justify the fencing of the playing fields. It mitigates an objection from Sport England regarding the loss of a sports area within the school, but will be unfenced, so clearly does not present a safeguarding issue. Why is it different to the need to enclose the main open space? The Green Network and Green Guarantee, paragraphs 8.16 and 8.18. The LPA recognises the inclusion of this open space in the Green Network subject to council commitments to protect, maintain and enhance such a space. The policy requires the council to maintain an adequate supply of open space to meet the diverse needs of an expanding population, and Prisley is definitely expanding. Diverse is the key word. Enclosing this area behind a fence will preserve only one use, that of football, the very opposite of diverse needs, and reduces free open space that becomes even more valuable as the population grows. In summary, whilst there is a need to provide additional secondary school places and secure the school's access to sufficient outdoor space, there are significant disadvantages to the wider community in this proposal. The issues will be more usefully addressed by working together to develop a solution that suits the diverse needs of an expanding population in addition to the narrow requirements of the applicants.
Thank you. Councillor Robert Cadman.
Yeah, apologies for my tardiness. You wait for a bus and speak along at once.
You made it just in time for the public speaking session.
Thank you. I ran the last bit, so. Thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of St George's and Prisley Parish Council. The Parish Council, whilst a regular commenter on planning applications, has not, at least since I joined the Parish Council in May 2019, had a member come to this place to set out our concerns and objections about a planning application. Whilst not a material consideration in the deciding of this planning application, I hope the members note and recognise that my attendance here this evening is demonstration of the seriousness with which members of the parish council on which I sit and the residents we represent take this matter. Please also note that we are not against the expansion of schools per se, and we appreciate how important it is that there are enough school places within our borough. However, let us also remember that the issue before us is a planning application and not a debate on school places or where they should be. The parish council has a trio of objections, namely the fencing off of invaluable green space, light and noise pollution for residents, and traffic impact on local residents. Put simply, the fencing off of the T-Strive playing field is wrong. This green space was gifted by Baron Stafford in 1991 for recreational use by local people and not for educational purposes. With the covenant in place, it could in fact be argued that this application is ultra vires. Baron Stafford recognised the value of access to green space for mental and physical well-being. Indeed, with knowledge of this plan earlier in the year, whilst on a regular visit to the field, I counted around 30 people in numerous groups of different ages using the space as intended by Baron Stafford. You do not enhance one community by taking away from another. Secondly, the addition of a 3G pitch would be of great benefit to the school, allowing year-round use of an outdoor space that will not deteriorate as traditional grass pitches do. The parish council is however concerned that 15-metre high floodlights will cause a light pollution to nearby residents at night and may particularly affect young children. In addition to this, there is also concern that noise pollution from users on the pitch will impact on local residents too. Lastly, there is significant and warranted concern regarding the increase in traffic. The school already causes incredible amounts of traffic problems for local residents twice a day. Indeed, I myself am impacted by this with parents using my own road as a drop-off and pick-up zone. And just a couple of weeks ago, I had a local resident and neighbour contact me regarding the parking of cars with engines left idling and the difficulty this causes for residents in entering and departing their homes. For members' benefit, my road with its offshoots is a cul-de-sac with around 100 houses, many of which are 2 or more car households. It's also not the nearest residential road to the school, illustrating the existing wide impact of this problem. I hope when members did a site visit, they could at least see for themselves either the traffic problems or the high use of the playing field. This is a planning application with shortcomings and failings across the board, and I urge members to refuse permission and advise the applicants to go back to the drawing board on coming up with a more appropriate scheme. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Cadman. Nicely done in just 3 minutes. Luke Coffey or Mark Anderson, is it? The applicants? Or both? You've only got 3 minutes to share, not each.
The Hampton deck of the committee. Yeah, so we're splitting between us, Chair, the 3 minutes. Members, thank you for the opportunity to speak in connection with proposals to enhance educational facilities at the Holy Trinity Academy through the construction of a new teaching block, infill extension and playing pitch improvements. The expansion of the Academy will assist in meeting the identified need for pupil places within the borough based on current projections. The proposed enhancements will enable the school to support an additional 300 pupils and will deliver improved educational facilities for the local area. The scheme will improve sporting facilities on site through the construction of an artificial playing pitch, enhancements to existing grass pitches and the provision of additional changing facilities. The improvements will allow for a greater flexibility and intensity of usage of sports facilities for both pupils and the local community, where access will be secured in perpetuity for a community use agreement. In their current condition, the pitches located along Tees Drive are unusable by the Academy due to a range of safeguarding issues, and they are unable to utilise these with the regularity required to meet current curriculum requirements. The enclosure of the pitches will provide a safe, secure and maintainable sports facility for both students and the local community. The contentious nature of the loss of informal access to these pitches is noted. However, the open space surrounding the playing pitches will remain accessible as part of the green network. Formal access will be maintained through the community use agreement, and overall there will be a better balance of informal and formal open space in the area. The impact of the proposals on the surrounding highway network will be addressed through the implementation of an updated travel plan, providing a range of measures to reduce vehicular trips. This includes the reopening of the school car park to provide an additional 29 spaces to be used at peak times, which will further reduce congestion on the highway network. The application before you fully complies with national and local planning policy, and I kindly request that you support this scheme, that will result in significant improvements to education and recreational facilities in the borough. Thank you for your time, and I will now hand over to Mark Anderson, Chair of Governors for the Holy Trinity Academy.
Thank you. Holy Trinity Academy, HTA, support this application and have worked very closely with the local authorities and specialists to get to this point. We look forward to working with contractors to expand the school facilities in line with BB 103, which will allow the school to increase the numbers of local young people who can access the excellent teaching and learning that HTA can offer. There's a huge pressure on number of school places in the local area, and HTA has been oversubscribed for the last few years. We know there are increased numbers of students in local primary schools, and they will need secondary school places in the future. This proposal allows HTA to expand our key role in developing the young people in our local community and responds to the large-scale housing developments in the local area. If this proposal is approved, HTA are happy to work with the local community to ensure all these new resources are fully utilised through a community use agreement. We also have committed to all the maintenance and management aspects of the facilities in this application to ensure this fantastic asset is sustained long into the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Back to the planning officer then.
Thank you, Chair. So the LPO recognise the high number of objections to the enclosure of the existing pitches that currently sit outside the school's main grounds. The freedom of residents to access the pitches when not in use by the school must be balanced against the needs and requirements of the school to provide a satisfactory level of outdoor sports facilities and a safe environment for students and teachers. When considering these particular points, along with the ability of residents to book and use what will be a better maintained sports pitch through a community use agreement outside of school hours, officers continue to recommend to members that the application in this respect is approved as it accords with the relevant local plan policy NE3. In respect of highways impacts, due to the expansion of the school, this can largely be mitigated through a robust travel plan. The school will be encouraged to use the Motive Stars programme, which is supported by the Department of Transport and is an accreditation scheme that provides a travel plan toolkit. The school will be expected to engage with the Council's road safety team, who will assist with the creation of the school travel plan, which will encourage more sustainable modes of transport. In addition, the highways some requested can be used as required to mitigate local impact of the extension through traffic restriction orders or other traffic management measures. Suitable construction management will also be a condition of approval. Finally, impacts of the 3G pitch have been addressed in the application with the submission of noise and light impact assessments. Officers remain satisfied that the type of lighting proposed, which will avoid light spill, and the erection of suitable acoustic fencing will mitigate any additional impact. Members are reminded that the 3G pitch replaces an existing grass pitch but could also be used outside of school hours. As such, officers' recommendation remains unchanged. It is therefore recommended that delegated authority is granted to the Service Delivery Manager to grant full planning permission subject to conditions, informatives and a memo of understanding. Before I pass back to you, Chair, I'm just going to pass over to our legal officer, Ian Ross, who's going to just say a few words about open space. Thank you.
Yes, just one element of this proposal includes the enclosure of areas of external playing pitches with fencing. It has been pointed out in representations that the land to be enclosed has been held by the council as public open space since 1991-92, when it was acquired off Telford Development Corporation, and it has been asserted in representations that enclosure of this public open space would be contrary to the open space legislation. Legal definitions of open space include any land, whether enclosed or not, on which there are no buildings, and also includes land used for recreation. From information currently available, it appears that when the council acquired the land off Telford Development Corporation in 1992, it was used as a playing field, or was used as playing fields, and so fits the definition of open space. The open space use appears to have continued. As the committee report mentions, as the committee report mentions, it is acknowledged that this land should be treated as public open space. Where land is public open space, it is held by the council under a statutory trust for the benefit of the public. There is in fact already an express power to enclose public open spaces with railings, and that's not uncommon with public open spaces, with railings and gates, but whilst land remains as public open space, the council should still allow public access to it. However, and importantly, the public open space status does not prevent the council from leasing or selling the land, the public open space land, and if it is sold or leased, the public open space status and the statutory trusts fall away.
You lost it?
No, I've got to find it back. In respect of the external areas at Holy Trinity Academy, public open space status does not prevent the council from leasing these external areas to the academy and the public open space status then falling away. There are certain procedural requirements to follow before the land can be leased, but after they are complied with, the public open space land can be leased to the Holy Trinity Academy. After the lease is entered into, the statutory duty, which requires the land to be publicly accessible at all times, falls away. If the planning permission is granted, subject to the terms of the lease and the controls imposed through planning conditions, the Holy Trinity Academy can then enclose these areas and make them available under the terms of the community use agreement as explained in the report. Members have the planning officer's report describing the position relating to the current use of the areas and the justification and the description of the proposed new arrangements. The current use is as described and the proposed new community arrangements as described for the use of these external areas are described in the report, and importantly they are material planning considerations and need to be weighed in the planning balance and given such weight as members consider appropriate in the determination of this planning application. That's it.
Thank you, Ian. It's open for the committee. Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, Chairman. As you might expect, I would comment on this one, as it is in my ward, and I have been involved with the introduction of a secondary school in Prisley in the something like 20 odd years that I've been a member of the council for Prisley, and I think it would be best for those newer members to have a small potted history of the emergence of this school and the playing fields. The original application was first mooted before 2013. The original idea by the previous administration was a 1,200 person secondary school, fully financed under the Building Schools for the Future programme, which would have purchased the land and built the school and provided the required amount of playing fields that it would need under the education regulations. Following a change of administration, the plans were cut back and the money for the Building Schools for the Future for this school, a proportion of it was diverted to other schools in the borough. So we have a cut down, pared back school in the original application 2013/0774. Within that permission there is to be a community use agreement. I think it was condition number 22 on the planning permission. That doesn't seem to have ever been implemented. I have today checked on the file for that application and there is no community use agreement on the computer file. And I know that in I think it was 2015 the school applied to have that condition removed because they said they couldn't take over the disputed areas of playing fields because they couldn't afford to maintain the cost of something like £30,000 a year. so they decided not to do it, and they never did a community use agreement, to my knowledge, unless there's one hidden away somewhere that nobody knows about, or sorry, the people don't know about, that the planners do. We now have the case where the school has to increase in size, mainly because of the housing that was planned at the time of the original application and is now being implemented. But as the report said, the amount of land that they've got for the school and the playing fields is only 17,000 square metres, and it needs 48,000 square metres under the current regulations to be allowed as a viable recognised school. So they've got to find 31,000 metres. And lo and behold, next door to the school is the Tees Drive playing fields, which is an open area that has been used for, to my knowledge, over 30 years by the residents of Prisley. It's, as the report says under paragraph 819, it's a green guarantee site, there to guarantee by the council for the people and the residents of Prisley. But it seems that this council's changed its mind, and the green guarantee site regulations on that they are working under mean nothing to the council. They can override them by granting permission for this land to be taken off the residents for the school, which shows to me the complete disregard and disgust and the lack of consideration of the residents of Prisley by this administration. But going through the rest of the thing, I note now that this new application is going to propose using part of the school car park to allow parents to drive in, drop off their kids in the morning, and also pick them up in the evening. That has been there, that car park has been there since the very beginning of this school being in place. And in fact, the report mentions that about a third of the car park is not used, and even when the school expands, a good proportion of it will not be used. The question that reminds me is, why hasn't the school been doing this before to alleviate the problems with the traffic going in and out of the school? But of course, one of the main problems with this school is the entrance is on Tees Drive, which goes into Prisley Avenue. The original consideration for having a school was looking at having direct access off Castle Farm Way, which would have had an easy in and out way into the school. But no, they decided against that. It was cheaper to do it down Tees Drive and blight the people living there. Now, they're talking about a use agreement. I've only got is a summary, not the full detail is on the file, and it says they're going to use the allow people during term time between 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night, and weekdays, and 9 till 8 o'clock weekends, and school holidays will be 9 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock weekdays and weekends. This is quite interesting because if you look at the report, the actual school day, they finish at 2. I know because I see them all walking past my home, going in every afternoon. Or they can have sports facilities till about 4:15. So why are they not having use for the public, if this goes through, from say 4:30, rather than making people wait till 6 o'clock? Because with 6 o'clock, for a greater part of the autumn and spring term, the local residents will not be able to have any recreational use of these facilities during weekdays, because it'd be too dark. So that's a problem. I mean, there are a number of objections, over 500, and they're all detailed within paragraphs 7.2, 7.3, 7.4 and 7.5. I have never, and that's just a summary of them, over 500 people are going to be adversely affected if we grant this application and allow the council to take away the amenity use of this recreation field. And I think that is a thing that should be resisted completely. And then the other thing in this summary of this agreement says that the Academy can charge people who've used it freely for over 30 years to actually go and use the ground that they've been having free use of for years. And it's not and there's no limit on these charges. What it says, the charge to adopt similar levels of charges for community use. Only similar, not requiring them to have similar, as well, adopt similar. That means they can charge what the hell they like. Apart from the council access, they get it a special rate. Is that a backhander or something? Looks like it to my mind. I think this application is going to have an adverse, detrimental effect on the people of the residents of Prisley, who are. I know that they are, according to the index of deprivation, one of the least deprived areas. Presumably that's because they actually, most of them are reasonable levels of income. But they're actually going to be deprived of recreational facilities by this council. And I think that's disgusting, and I cannot support that, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher. Do you want to come back after? Or do you want some more questions?
I think just carry on, Chair. I think.
Okay. Councillor Sahota.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank Councillor Fletcher for the school history. No one knows more about the school history than I do, because I was a leader of the council at that time when he went through, and I still got the scars on my back with all the people sort of came around and all kinds of representation and saying, at first there was an issue that their Prisley should have a school, and that carried on. I've been on the council now for over 20 years, Mr. Chairman, and we used to have a representation, and yes, in the end, the school was there. Councillor Fletcher is quite right. There was all kinds of planning, so where we should. There was even planned for it around the Salisbury Avenue around the corner. But however, that's a history. And then when it was planned and then it was going through, I used to get, as a leader, all kinds of representation. Why are you forcing a religious school on Prisley? We don't want that. I had my doors kicked down. Not literally, but you know what I mean, the representation, Mr. Chairman. And then there even was a legal challenge from, I don't know, I think it must have been a local residents, and which was thrown out, very quickly. So I seems to remember that. And then what it comes down to, Mr. Chairman, is that, like somebody said, education, 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 and this is for the future of our children. Education, yes, we are having these houses built around Prisley, and they've been built all around the other side on the A5 as well, and behind where the school is, and so on. And the council has to plan for the future of these schools, because sometimes when I have sat here for many years, and one of the objections used to be, you're building a school, but where's the services? Where's the school places? Where's the doctor's surgery? Where's this and that? So while the houses are being built all around there, and you have to have these services. You've got to plan for the children's education for our future. And I think the school's done well. I have visited it. When it was first opened. I think it's an excellent school. It's an excellent building, and I've been away from the leadership now for the last 5 years, so I hope they have done well. But I think officers have highlighted it, but perhaps they can. Ian, did you said, I know you were reading at a legal paper there, the green spaces, and is this up to the cabinet to look at it, to remove the green spaces covenant or whatever that's on it? Is that what you just said on your, when you were reading it there, was it?
No, I addressed the Open Space Act legislation, and the position on the Open Spaces Act. The Green Guarantee sets out the protection afforded by the Green Guarantee is to remove the officer delegation to dispose of properties or change use of properties. It requires such decisions to be made by Cabinet. That was the gist of the Green Guarantee idea, in very brief terms.
So it's up to the Cabinet or the Council, isn't it?
It's a Cabinet. It's a cabinet decision,
isn't it? So it's not on that decision on it. So that's sort of that's what I was thinking about, really. So when we come to decide on this, we should take that into consideration. But is it a planning consideration, is it?
No, it's not.
It's not.
The mechanism for disposal isn't the planning.
It's not. It's for the administration to.
Yes. On this it is. Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
There is no planning policy that relates to the Green Guarantee. There's Green Network policies. The Green Guarantee is recognised in the local plan.
Yeah.
But it is a separate part of the council in terms of strategy that needs to consider that.
I'll leave my comments there, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure the others would like to come in here. On here.
Councillor Middleton.
Thank you.
I'm not sure we should be accusing people of backhanders who've got no right to apply, firstly. Also, obviously it quite sounds that it's a very socially used space. It's really good for people's well-being, and the community use it a lot for that purpose, which obviously I really support. But has it been is this fence necessary, and is there a way of giving more access? Is that been explored? Is the way of them having more access so that it's a gated fence that people can access more often and still utilise that space, or is that?
The council have explored obviously different options in terms of enclosing that space, and have worked with the school in that respect. This is the most appropriate form of providing that space to safeguard the children and the teachers, but also allow people to use it outside of those hours through that community use agreement. Without gating it off, you're still going to have those issues at play. You can't get around that.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you. I was glad I went to the site visit yesterday, because I've never been to the school before, I must admit, and I was impressed, to be honest, with what you've got already. I thought, compared to some of the schools in my area, it was quite impressive. Interesting that when people say What about the infrastructure? Well, this is 106 money, I believe, that's doing all this, and this is a bonus and a benefit. The green area, we have trouble locally with dogs on our football pitches and droppings all over the place, and I fully understand the need in a sense for this fencing, because who wants to play football on a pitch where you've got to continually move dog poo? And we saw some evidence of that yesterday. But I do get the argument about the community use. Just a few questions though, really. I think they're mostly to Ian. Is there a clear travel plan on this? That's the first question. The drop-off point, it's already been mentioned by Councillor Fletcher, which it's not used. Can we not condition that that is used, because it's going to help an awful lot in terms of the managing school times, drop-offs, etc. So that ought to be, so it ought to be enforced in a sense, so it's used. This covenant that was mentioned about, I forget his name, Baron somebody or other, is that relevant to this application in terms of planning? I don't know. It was given by, I forget who said it now, Ant or Deck, I forget.
That's related to covenants and...
Yeah, but I say, the fact it was given in perpetuity to the people, is that a relevance to us, or is that going to be argued separately?
It relates back to the things that Ian Ross was talking about.
I think it was, I'm sorry, I won't call you Ant or Deck, that's just being rude, I don't mean to be. Mr. Coffey or Mr. Anderson did mention that there could be a community use agreement put in. That clearly hasn't been, so can that be discussed so that there may be better use for the community? And the final question, I was just wondering, we spoke yesterday that the school had, I believe, 600 pupils.
Yeah. Sorry, I got the exact figures for that.
I was saying with a potential for 900, and when this, if this goes forward, it'll have the possibility of 1,200. Yet I heard from one speaker that it was already oversubscribed. I mean, I don't know what the fit position is. So yeah, that's enough questions from me. If you could answer those, please.
I'll go to that one straight away. I clarified today. I got those figures on. 816 pupils is on the current register.
816. Okay, thank you.
And then there's 87 staff as well.
Okay. Can you answer all the points that have been raised?
Yeah, I'm going through them. The drop-off point, that will be conditioned. That'll be part. That's conditioned as part of the travel plan. Okay, so but we're asking for further details of how they're going to operate and manage that drop-off situation.
Conditioned and enforced.
We will enforce.
Yeah, thank you.
I told that 6 years ago.
The travel plan, there's a sort of a draft sort of makeup of a travel plan that's been submitted as part of the application. However, they'll need to sort of provide and do a sort of a travel plan, and that's what I mentioned, the mode shift stars process, and they can work with the council with that sets them up, and then they can self-manage that travel plan. So that's something, and then they'll be annually reviewed, and that's part of the condition as well.
Okay, thank you. I mean, the last comment I'll make, Chair, is that I'm glad I went, because I was able to see how much of the area is still open to the public and is still accessible to the public. So I know I don't live there, so I don't get the same emotion about it, but I did think as a package it was pretty impressive to me, so I actually feel I could support it. Thank you.
Can you answer all the points that have been raised?
Just the community use agreement question I didn't fully answer. So there's a condition there as well, and that's a condition that's been provided by Sports England as part of their processes as well. So, and they'll need to work with, the council will need to work with Sports England to provide that community use agreement and word that up properly, and just sort of read out some of the things that's needed in that. So that includes what forms part of that community agreement, which areas of the school form part of it, obviously the times, promotion and booking arrangements, how people can book that. I mean, that's important, because we need to make sure that we see how people can access it and book that, because that's not obvious at the moment. access by non-educational establishment, management responsibilities. So there's a whole host of things, and Sports England have a sort of a template model that they use. So we'll be worked with.
There's a fair comment someone made that it should be available probably from say 4:30 rather than 6:30 in the evening. But thank you for your answers anyway.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor, got your name.
Fingy. Councillor Fingy.
Thank you very much. It's nice to make an impact. No, it's all right. So, I mean, nobody's denying, the school does a really, really good job. Really, really pleased with it. It's fantastic. I mean, I was on the planning committee that approved the school originally. And, I'm not old. So, I mean, and members might recall that the Cabinet, that I did bring up the issue of secondary school places at full councils several years ago, and the Cabinet member there denied there was any need for any extra places. But anyway, so now here we are, after the school's been there only 6 years, we've now got an increase of 50%. I mean, really, it's more a case of there shouldn't be an extension to the school. There should be just a new school put where it's needed because of all the building that's gone on. And this is more of a sticking plaster, really. I do find it difficult on 8.5 to see how this application complies with policy NE3. I'm not convinced yet that it can demonstrate that the proposal will provide replacement facilities to equal or improve standard in a suitable alternative location, because the public can't access it. Where can it be demonstrated that the proposal will provide appropriate areas of public open space? Well, it's not public open space because you can't go there unless the school allows it. Where the proposal can secure other wider benefits which outweigh the disadvantages of the loss. Well, the field is still a field, even though it's just got a fence round it. And okay then, it might be a posher football pitch, but it's not that much of a difference. And where appropriate mitigation measures are provided to compensate for the impact upon the existing provision. Well, where is the compensation? There isn't any. So actually, this particular application is actually against policy, which is quite surprising. Now then, the thing is, though, that we need to remember that we've got loss of public access here. I mean, we've got the situation whereby it's being, the school very kindly will allow the public to access their fields. Well, hang on a minute, it's the public's fields in the first place. Isn't it? Isn't the public very kindly allowing the school to use its own to use the fields for their purpose? And then, to add insult to injury, they're then going to charge the public to use their own fields, which, quite frankly, seems a bit ironic to me. And on 8.2, which is on 107, we get the dining hall extension. I mean, 60 spaces for an extra 300 pupils. So it's 5 to a seat. And that's if the existing dining facilities are capable of accommodating the 816 pupils. So, I mean, at this rate, you could spend all day having dinner time. So I really don't understand. Why is the dining hall extension so small? It's ridiculous. And where are the children supposed to go? They can't go. There are no cafes and restaurants for them to go to. So it's not big enough. It's patently not big enough. And we need a proper solution to that. On 8.3.1 on page 108. Now then, I remember at this when we considered the original school application, there was a lot of concern over the traffic chaos that the school would cause. And we were assured by the experts that all our concerns would be mitigated, one of which was the use of the school car park. And yet, 6 years on, I'm astonished to find that condition has never been enforced. Nobody's ever bothered over 6 years to actually go and see what's going on. I mean, what's happening with, why isn't enforcement? There's no point in us considering applications and allowing them to go through if there are conditions that it doesn't matter. You can put whatever conditions you like, but if they're not enforced, they're meaningless, absolutely meaningless. So, quite honestly, I would love to be able to support it, but I can't. The thing is that the Chair of Governors said happy to work with the local community. But why haven't they been working with the local community in the last 6 years? Why hasn't it been considered? So I just don't understand. Now, the community use agreement, there should be a condition on the community use agreement if this application goes through, that the public are not charged. Why should the public be charged to use their own open space? It's ridiculous. So I'm sorry, Chair, but quite honestly, there are too many holes in this, and I do think that really it should go back to the drawing board. And I appreciate the officer in a difficult position because there isn't enough space to expand this school, and they're doing the best that they can. But quite honestly, it's just not acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor Dugmore. Do you want to reply to that, Ian?
A couple of those points, Chair. Policy NE3, which is the sort of open space policy, it covers open space, sports and recreation facilities, so it isn't just open space. Obviously, you have to take a balanced approach to each of the points raised. One particularly point 3, where the proposal can secure over wider benefits that which outweigh the disadvantages of the loss of such open space. But there are advantages, providing those advantages for the school, safeguarding, and then when you add in that the community use agreement as well, so people can still use it, and it is still there as open space. Open space can be enclosed, so it's still there. It's just how it's managed and how it's operated. So I think we've discussed that balance in the report. As for the dining room extensions, I mean that's for the school to manage. At the moment, I think they have two sessions for dining. Not all children will go at the same time, but yeah, that's the extensions that have been proposed and are in front of us.
On two issues on this. Has the road safety issue been addressed? And also, why the floodlights on at 10 o'clock is not going to cause antisocial behaviour?
So, road safety, in terms of parking or?
No, there was issues with crossing the road and the safety of it from one area to another.
I mean, those issues are away from the school. I mean, those would have been issues that were picked up with the original school application, not related particularly to this application. Right. So that's an existing situation.
Councillor Middleton?
Sorry, just to clarify then, because a big issue is the use of the space for the public. That's not a material consideration we can use. Is that to be clear what's been said here?
Ian, do you want to make comment on this?
No, as I said, the previous use of the land as an open space is a material consideration. You're comparing it with the proposed uses that are being put forward by the school and in the application. They're being weighed in the planning balance. Both of those are material considerations, and members give them the weight that they think it deserves. The points that I made earlier were that the Open Spaces Act provisions which preserve the statutory trusts and the use of the land as public open space fall away upon disposal of the land, and the proposal is that the land is going to be leased to the Holy Trinity Academy.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Fletcher.
With your agreement, Chairman, the report says that the reason they've got to fence off the open space is for safeguarding issues. They actually don't say in detail what safeguarding issues they're talking about. There was a mention about dog fouling, but the council is implementing a public spaces protection orders on all land owned by the public spaces owned by the council, which is supposed to alleviate the problem of dog fouling. I don't know what other safeguarding things they're talking about. So I don't think they've actually satisfied the reasons for safeguarding, that they need to have this fence there. So, and if the fence wasn't there and access was available to all without charge, I could support it. But as a present, you know, there is no justification detailed within this report or in any of the documentations on the planning site, because I've been through the whole lot. It took me a couple of weeks, but I've been through everything and all the 500 plus objections. You know, the council has not provided, to my mind, satisfactory reasons why they should fence off that ground and take it away from the public in Prisley.
Yes, if you want to.
I mean, the safeguarding issues are wider than just dog fouling. You take children outside of a school, and you know you're always going to be at risk potentially of antisocial behaviour, other users using the pitch when the school needs to use it. But all those issues. It's not just about dog fouling. Yes, that is an issue that's been raised, but there's more than that.
So you're saying that the school staff can't cope with the other people around?
I'm not saying they can't cope. I'm saying that by providing the fencing around the site, you remove that as an issue.
You can see through the fence, so I mean, unless you put an opaque fence all the way around.
Oh, don't give them ideas.
Yeah, well, yeah, but
I think it's adding an extra level of protection to the school. So there's potentially could be a significant number of children at any one point using that fence. Yes, the school and the teachers will kind of go to their appropriate lengths to safeguard the children insofar as is practical and possible. But I think anyone kind of with children attending a school, I think it's reasonable to expect that those children should be in a safe, enclosed kind of environment, and that's kind of what's proposed here.
Yeah. Seconder for that? Moved and seconded. All those in favour of the recommendations as they stand, please show. Those against? 2 against. That goes through then. Thank you. I think we had a fair debate on that actually. Okay. Get back to the next one, which is TWC 221/0637 on page 33. It's the former Builder's Yard, Barrack Lane, Lilleshall.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks a full planning permission for 3 dwellings and an associated utility hub which would accommodate the services for the dwellings. The site is located in Lilleshall, and at the same time as being technically designated as within the rural area, it is also a previously developed site that has accommodated a number of uses in the past. Now, due to its location within the rural area, the applicant is seeking permission for this residential scheme under policy HO10 and criterion number 3, which states that the council will support applications for rural housing where they represent exceptional quality or innovative design. The scheme has the support of the Regional Design Review Panel Design Midlands and all statutory consultees. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions and informatives. Thank you, Chair.
I have a number of speakers on this one. Councillor David Shaw from the Parish Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. The Parish Council and village community strongly oppose this application. It must be remembered that this site was a greenfield area before the applicants tipped 1,000 tonnes of hardcore onto the ground and created bonds to screen illegal activities. The site is now an outstanding enforcement notice. Upon learning of the proposed development, the local community felt strongly enough to ask the Parish Council for support, and 80 objections were posted, which is quite a large number, or a very large number for a small village. While we are very confident that every single objector has a connection with the village, it must also be said that there are a limited number of supporting comments which come from random locations across the country. We, the parish, worked very hard for many years to get the neighbourhood plan accepted, but the officer's report gives limited consideration to this, and yet it was adopted by Telford and Wrekin, and as such is a key consideration and should not be dismissed. In terms of the planning policies, the development is not an infill site, and it does not contribute to the character and distinctiveness of this village as required in policy Dev 1. The scheme also fails to comply extensively with Dev 2 design policies, and the design does not provide integrated addition to the village. It replaces green spaces that did contribute to the character of the village. The scheme is not consistent with prevailing scale or materials that reflect local character, and is accessed over private land by a farm track. The proposal gives no consideration to the adverse impact on the amenity of the neighbourhood properties, particularly the busy adjacent farm. A major concern is the site is extensively undermined, and making safe to build houses will require large-scale grouting works in line with those completed in the 1990s, in the wrong decade. This could potentially destabilise neighbouring properties, and any damage caused may result in legal action. As the responsible body for approval of the development, you may wish to consider the implications to Telford and Wrekin for damage claims made by neighbouring landowners, which is a key consideration of local plan policy BE1. The Parish Council urge you to refuse this application, enabling the enforcement notice to be implemented and the site restored to the former green space, supporting Telford and Wrekin's green space policies and climate change strategy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Eade.
Well, I have to say you're over strict, Chairman. You run it extremely well. Anyway, thank you, Chairman. It's really important, I think, to understand and appreciate the full history of this site and why we're considering whether or not to inflict a design such as this on the borough. and it's a decision that can truly be made locally by this committee and not some design panel living elsewhere who don't live have to live with its consequences. As the report states, there have been a multitude of attempts to try and build houses on this site, all of which have been refused by this committee. Indeed, those outcomes have been fully supported by 2 independent planning inspectors who have totally endorsed this committee's decisions. The latest application for BH storage was also refused by this council, and an enforcement notice issued in 2020. An independent planning inspector fully backed that decision also. So what we're faced with now is a naked attempt to use our own policy HO10 to circumvent all of our previous refusals. However, as I said earlier, despite a panel of unknown individuals telling us that this is an innovative design of exceptional quality, and despite the officer's recommendation that this should be accepted, the choice is really up to yourselves individually. The view of this design is very subjective, and as such, should you please decide to turn down this application, I do not believe for one moment that the council would incur costs at any subsequent appeal. Now, Chairman, I would ask for an opinion on that assertion to please be given to committee members by officers before deliberation is started on this application. It is an important consideration, and it does free up local decision making. As for this being an exceptional design, well, have a look at the drawings yourselves. It's exceptionally bad, and without doubt the worst design I think I've ever seen. How on earth can we ever contemplate being told by individuals with no connection to this borough whatsoever that we should build this sort of nonsense within our rural area? And despite the report stating it's in the urban area, it clearly lies within historic and sensitive ancient woodland and is right on top of a working farm. Chairman, there are approaching 80 objections from the local community and 1 in support. All of the support, like the design panel themselves, lies outside of this borough. To sum up, I don't believe this is exceptional or innovative and clearly fails policy HO10. Neither does it comply with policy BE1, as it clearly doesn't respect or respond positively to its context. Neither does it enhance the quality of the local built and natural environment, landscape, setting or topography. And I would urge members, please consider this very carefully. It is within your gift to stop this. I'm quite sure that it can be confirmed that should it go to appeal, that we won't incur costs on this. This is very much a local decision. Thanks very much.
Mr. Stephen Locke.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, fellow councillors. My name is Stephen Locke. I've been asked to represent many local residents in objecting to this application. While I am myself a local resident, I'm also a practising Chartered Town Planner, and I've got 28 years of experience in that field. I'd like to remind you that all previous residential applications have been refused on this site, as Andrew has said. Basically, it's unsustainable, it's in open countryside, it's got poor access, and it's adjacent to a working dairy farm. It's important that the site should not be considered as it currently appears, but should be restored to its greenfield status as per the outstanding enforcement notice. Officer reports claim there are a number of material considerations that justify a recommendation for approval. I beg to differ. The reason for dismissing the appeal in 2017 are more important now than ever. The site continues to be in a countryside location, it's not well related to other dwellings, the access has not changed at all, the proposal is now for 3 houses, not 1, and all of the factors remain unchanged. The new local plan may identify Lillishall as suitable for some limited infill development, but the site is outside the village and is surrounded by farmland and native woodland. It's not infill. The applicant is relying on local plan policy HO10.3, which is guided by the National Planning Policy Guidance under paragraph 80. These policies expect a truly groundbreaking design, and to date only around 70 houses nationally have ever been approved on this basis. Members need to question if 3 similar houses using what is now familiar design technology is truly unique, outstanding and innovative. I'm sure you agree this is not. The scheme is also not sensitive to the local area. Both paragraph 80 and the design review panel require an independent landscape impact assessment, which the application has failed to provide. The design review panel also raised a number of concerns which have not been addressed, including sustainability, costs, landscape impact, accessibility, the achievement of the communal living concept, and the lack of local community engagement. Contrary to the application report, we consider that the policy BHE criteria have not been met. The scheme does not respond positively to the context or enhance the landscape setting. It does not enhance the skyline or promote good links through the site. It's not a secure environment given its proximity to the working farm, and encourages isolation. It also has questionable energy efficiency credentials, does not consider the past mine workings, and will prejudice the neighbouring farm business. The application supporting reports contain many inaccuracies and omissions, including inaccurate drainage data, questionable noise recording information, ignorance of the past mine workings, and lack of acknowledgement that the public footpath is disputed. How can a valued judgment be made on this basis? Can I ask members to consider one final thought? Imagine living at your current home and a planning application for a new working dairy farm is submitted with the buildings only 20 paces from your house, and with all the associated activities that entails. Would you object to that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Locke. Jonathan Warrington.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I've lived in the parish all my life, 53 years. I went to the preschool when it was at the Memorial Hall before they built the flat roof thing they've got up at the infant school, and that's nothing compared to what it is today. I then went to the village junior school, and that was founded in 1844 in an outbuilding of the Sutherland Estates hunting lodge. And underneath it had the cobbled floors and the wooden stalls for the hunting horses. It was absolutely amazing. Now Lillishall lends its name to the Lillishall Company, which was at the forefront of progress in the Industrial Revolution, and it brought better living standards to the next generation. Every generation wants the next to have it better than they did. But progress only comes with change, and change is often in conflict with our sentiments about the past. Many people, of course, are attracted to Lillishall, but they don't build in the same style as the old Sutherland Estate cottages that I live in, with no foundations, no cavity walls. We have damp and they're hard to heat. Now, modern houses have been built with modern materials, and they look very different to the old estate cottages that were once the dominant style. But that is progress, and the next generation having it better. I've seen much change. Both village shops have gone, 2 working farms are now residential estates, the wine merchants has gone, and the village-based milkman has also gone. So too is the shearing shed next to the school gone, where we used to be taken to see the sheep being sheared as kids. As for the junior school in the old hunting lodge, well, that was bulldozed to make way for a complex of retirement flats. Now, of course, these things tug at my heartstrings too, but I've had it better than my parents, certainly better than my grandparents. Now, historians look back at the Lillishall Company and how it brought progress and prosperity to people all around the world. And I hope that the historians of the future will look back at Lillishall and how today it was again at the forefront of solving tomorrow's challenges. No reasonable person would take a dislike to someone else because they looked different to them. They would seek what's in their heart. I hope the members will be able to see what's in the heart of this application.
Thank you, Mr. Warrington. Then Todd Jones or Aaron Chetwynd.
Hello, I'm Aaron Chetwynd. I'm representing the applicant. I'm the architect of these proposals. First of all, I'd like to thank the chairman and the councillors today at the committee meeting for their time and consideration. I understand that Councillor Eade has called in this application due to some concerns his constituents in the Lillishall have. I can understand these concerns, as I live in a small rural community just the other side of Stafford called Inglestry. I would like to convince the committee that it is our intention and that our client, Lorraine, our intention is not to upset the community, but to contribute in a positive way to the future of Lilleshall. The design has been through a rigorous design review process with an expert panel made up of architects and landscape architects who have deemed that the proposal represents exceptional quality and innovative design. This review process follows strict guidelines as set down by Telford and Wrekin Council, which ensures that applications that pass the bar are of the requisite standard. Particular effort has been made to design this scheme to fit into its unique rural landscape and to interpret the mixed heritage of the site. The site should be viewed as being part of the industrial archaeology of Lilleshall, and this is the context that we have responded to. We would like to emphasise that the material planning conditions have changed considerably when compared to previous applications, and this is robustly referenced within the Planning Officer's report. The overriding policy for our proposal is HO10 Section 3. The proposed site is a small, almost micro development of 3 highly sustainable family houses set within a rewilded landscape. We believe this context-led green approach holds the key for building better, sustainable rural homes for the future. This methodology is required now more than ever to tackle climate change and the climate emergency. And we feel that the application is exactly in line with the forward-thinking Telford and Wrekin Green Agenda. Telford and Wrekin have always had a strong track record on their approach to climate change, and the innovative council proposals considered recently for a community municipal fund bond where local residents help to fund climate change project captures precisely the ethos of our proposal. I hope you, the committee, will appreciate the time, vision and care involved in this application and vote to support these 3 exceptional quality, innovative, sustainable family homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chetwynd. Katie, you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, this site is unusual in many respects, members, and as you've seen from the report and heard from some of the speakers, it has a long planning history. Now, I know that some members have come across this site before, although I'm not sure if there are any of you today that haven't come across it. As some members weren't able to attend the site visit earlier today, I have included some extra photos in the presentation. What I'd like to make clear about these is that they were submitted with the application, they are part of the application file. They do date from a time when there were still some storage containers on the site, but the purpose of them is to show you the scope of the site, the dimensions, the settings, but please bear that in mind when you are looking at them. So the committee report goes into a lot of detail about the planning history and the material considerations. I'm intending to keep the presentation quite brief on that, but if there is anything that you particularly want to ask me about in the report, then please do ask me on that. So as members will have seen from the site and location plans, we're talking about a roughly triangular site, and it's accessed off Barrack Lane, which is an unadopted highway. To the south of the site, we have open fields. To the west is Old Coppice Lodge, which has an extensive curtilage and a significant area of tree preservation orders. And then on the eastern side, we have the Hutchison Way public right-of-way, and beyond that, we have Newhouse Farm and the buildings and fields associated with that. Now, as you've heard, there's a very involved planning history with this. There have been previous refusals for residential development on this site before. That is detailed in the report. The most significant one of these is an appeal that was refused in 2017, which is just 4 years ago, so it's recent enough to be material. And I'm going to be referring back to that as part of the presentation. because it's the inspector's reasons for refusal that set the benchmark of where we need to be assessing this application and any future applications on this site. Does it overcome the inspector's reason for dismissing it? Now, I'd just like to start with the land use, and as I've already mentioned, it is in the rural area, but it does have a nil use as a result of the Certificate of Lawfulness application in 2019. If you want any more details on that, please do let me know. So that suggests that it actually has a very untouched greenfield appearance, but as you can see from the site, setting aside the storage containers, it's not a greenfield site. It has accommodated previous uses. This has included the former builder's yard. It's included a compound for vehicles and equipment when the limestone stabilisation project was taking place. And going back a long way in the past, there was a lockkeeper's cottage on the site as well. So it has had a number of uses over a period of time. And a lot of the greenfield appearance is down to not being occupied for periods of time. So, as I say, you need to take that land use into account as a material matter when you're making that planning balance of this site. Because it's rural area, and yes, it has a nil use, but it's quite clearly previously developed. Now, I'm going to move on to the planning history and the material considerations as part of that. When the inspectors when they dismissed the appeal in 2017, it was under the former local plan, and at that point Lilleshall was not identified as a sustainable rural settlement, and that is a key point to make, because since then we've had the current local plan adopted in 2018, and that does identify Lilleshall as one of 5 named settlements where we will consider rural housing. That is the key matter to be considering in this. So that has changed significantly, and that's 2018. So as all of our decisions need to be made in accordance with the development plan, that is something to be bearing in mind. Now, there's other material considerations to take into account with this. One of them, have you got the plan, Amy, of the location plan with the... That's the one. The one going back, please. There we go. So this is a very crude location plan for you, but I thought it would help to show some things that have happened in the local area. Outlined in red is the application site. If you see the site outlined in green, that is Fernley development, which is referred to in the report. Now, 6 months ago, it was approved for residential development under policy HO10. Okay? It was HO10 without any of the exception criteria. So that tells us that the village of Lilleshall, a sustainable location, is that close to the site. In fact, it's a distance of 74 metres. So thinking about the inspector's reasons for dismissing the appeal, one thing he said was it's not a sustainable site and it's not accessible. So if this site is to be considered sustainable and accessible, we need to look at what might have changed since then. So that distance is 74 metres. We have, at Fernley, it was the conversion of 1 property into 2 and then 2 new builds. So 4 new properties in total and 3 properties over and above what was already there. And we're looking at 3 properties here. Now, when the inspector was weighing up that this was not a sustainable site, not accessible, he looked at things like what means of transport would the future occupants of the builder's yard use, what access to services would they have, what facilities would they use. Now, I would suggest to you that the people who are going to live at Fernley, the green site, are going to have exactly the same access to the same services through the same means of transport, down Barrack Lane, accessing it the same way. So there's not a great material difference between those things, but that has happened since the inspector's decision. So again, we need to be taking that into account in thinking about this. The area hatched in yellow, while we've got that on the screen, that is the ancient woodland, and that is where the lime kilns are based that the design is referencing. So that's the proximity to the site that we're going to be talking about. The inspector said that this was not an infill site, and I would still agree with him on that. An infill site is a site that's within a continuous built-up frontage, Clearly it isn't, and that hasn't changed. But he also said that it wasn't well related to other dwellings in the area. Now, with the approval of Fernley at the end of the access drive, it is better related to dwellings in the area. Maybe not significantly, but it is better related, and that again is a material consideration to take into account with this. Now, there were some concerns raised through the objections that if this was allowed, it would open floodgates for the same kind of development happening everywhere. I want to reassure members that we don't believe that to be the case. This has come through specifically on policy HO10, but under the exception criteria 3. Because it's not an infill site, it can't be considered under policy HO10 as it is. We need to look at the exception criteria. The only one that's relevant to this site is number 3, which seeks for exceptional quality or innovative design. And on that basis, that is how we can look at this principle being acceptable for this site. If somebody came in with a standard set of housing developments, then no, the principle couldn't be acceptable for that. But because we're looking specifically through this policy, and we have the support of the design review panel, then that's how we can make the case for that. I would like to move on to talking a bit more about the design now. Now, this was one of the inspector's reasons for refusal, and he said that it would be harmful to the rural character and appearance of the area. It would be useful to have the site plan for the appeal up, if that's possible, Amy. So again, as you can see here, this is what the inspector was considering in 2017. It's a very different type of residential scheme to what we're thinking about today. As you can see from this, it's a traditional layout, 4 elevations, it's got a primary front, it's got a back. It's exactly the type of housing you will see in a lot of places. Now, it's important to understand this in the context of the inspector's comments from the appeal, because this is what he said. To any casual observer not versed in the planning history of the site, it would appear both visually and physically more related to the open countryside than any housing in the village. Now that's important because he's identifying that this site is strongly influenced by the landscape, by the countryside, and it's not visually well related to existing housing. So this means that if we're going to be looking at a residential development, it needs to be taking its inspiration from the landscape and from those things that give it that character. Already by proposing a housing form that shifts away from the traditional appearance that we've got here to something inspired by the landscape, then the application that's in front of us is materially different to what was considered by the inspector. And this needs to be taken into account when forming your planning judgment this evening. Now, a starting point for any positive design is identifying what gives the site its distinctiveness, and then allowing this to influence the design while working with the constraints on site. The applicant has selected the landscape setting and the industrial heritage and archaeology of the nearby lime kilns to influence the design approach for this proposal. As you've already heard from some of the speakers, this site has been occupied by a branch of the Donington Wood Canal, and as a result of that, the lime kilns are immediately adjacent to that. In fact, as you can see from the photographs, over time, the lime kilns have become disused, they've broken down, they've been overtaken by vegetation, and this has inspired what's called a biophilic design approach. Now, this was a new term on me when this application came along, but what it means is that it's looking at the relationship between architecture and nature and what happens as that changes and evolves over time. This was particularly commended by the design review panel, and if it were to be approved, it would be a first for Telford. We don't have a biophilic-led design anywhere in the borough. Now, the inspector also said that a traditional housing form on this site would appear incongruous in this part of the village due to its domestic appearance. So therefore, this approach, designing a small residential development where the houses are sculptural, habitable forms that are drawn from the landscape and its own unique surrounding historic context, would appear to address that issue by proposing something that's intended to respect the setting in a bespoke way. And in this way, we can see that it's overcoming the inspector's concerns about the impact on the character and setting of the site. Now, the inspector's fourth reason for dismissing the appeal was related to a new house farm next door, and in particular, at the time of deciding the appeal, the inspector didn't have enough information in front of him to say there's not going to be an impact here. He didn't say there's definitely going to be a damaging relationship here. He said there's not enough information for me to be able to tell. It's insufficient evidence. So as part of this application, we have looked at that more carefully. The applicant did submit the original noise, odour and pest reports with that, and our environmental health specialist assessed that, looked at it in terms of the orientation, the new construction and design of the dwellings, and felt that was sufficient to overcome those concerns. And it's important to make that point. So the specialist advising us felt that those things were dealt with. It would be useful at this point, I think, to go to the data of the noise report, Amy. Thank you. This is the raw data from the appeal in 2017. I will explain to you exactly the problem that the inspector had. So as part of the appeal submissions, the farmer at Newhouse Farm said, he gave a statement saying that farming activities could begin at 3:30 in the morning every single day. When you look at the noise data, what you can see is that over the 2 days that those readings were taken, the earliest one was taken at 9:28 in the morning, and the latest one was taken at 5 p.m. So there's nothing there to tell the inspector what happens at 3:30 in the morning. That's why they didn't know. It might have been okay, it might not have been okay, but there's nothing there for them to be able to demonstrate that and to be satisfied with it. So this is what the applicant has done to overcome this time around. They've had a noise report done that ran continuously for several days, taking recordings every 15 minutes. And that showed that the level of background noise is acceptable. It's the World Health Organisation that sets noise standards, WHO regulations. If you want me to go into more details about that, I can do. But what it came back and showed was it was an acceptable level of noise, and the mitigation caused by the way the buildings will be constructed, the way they'll be orientated and positioned, would not cause any issues, was the advice of our environmental health specialist. So on that basis, that's a material consideration that overcomes the inspector's fourth reason for appeal. I'm just going to scroll through what the speaker said, Chair, in case there's anything that I want to pick up on. Yes, so I'm just looking through the speakers, Chair, thank you. Okay. And you have heard some comments about design being subjective. And this is a really interesting matter to consider with this. So there's been a long history in planning guidance that makes a difference between what is classed as good design and what we all personally like, what our own personal tastes are. And there's guidance going back to 1980. The phraseology has changed over the years and the decades, but the thrust of it is recognise good design on its own merits, but don't impose your own tastes on it, because what you like may not be what somebody else likes, but it doesn't mean that it's not a really well constructed design. And this is echoed right the way through the planning policy that we see today. The NPPF at the moment, it has actually removed the phrase groundbreaking. It's not in there anymore, so it doesn't need to be a groundbreaking scheme. It does need to be innovative. It does need to be good quality design. There have been a number of objections from the village. You did hear it say that a number of letters of support came from outside of the village. I think it's only fair to make clear to members this is also the case for the letters of objection as well. They came from very far afield as well in some cases. I would say it's about an equal amount that came from outside. Some of the things that the design review panel brought up, yes, they did mention things to do with costings of the site. This is not something that we would look at with, we wouldn't ask for a viability assessment with a scheme of this scale that's not looking to provide any financial contributions. So this is something that the design review panel felt could be successfully managed through conditions as part of any approval. So that matter is dealt with. The groundworks that was mentioned, it does say in the report that our geotechnical specialist has looked at the scheme. He was happy with the ground reports provided. He's recommended a condition on that basis. So has our environmental specialist, environmental health specialist. That has been taken into account and found to be satisfactory subject to conditions. I think that's everything from me for now, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Open to the committee. Who wants to go first? Peter.
Is anything going to be done with that?
Anything going to be done?
Well, it's a bit messy at the moment, and it's not the greatest of roads in the world. I just wondered if there were any plans to make it, to improve it.
No, Barwick Lane is an unadopted highway, which means that the Local Highways Authority can't insist on that anyway, and that particular part of the access track is not in the applicant's ownership, so that would have to be done by private arrangement.
Coming next. Thank you, Chair. I've got a problem with this one, Mr. Chairman. I mean, call me old-fashioned or a traditionalist or whatever you like to call it. And it's not the building there, it's the design that I have an issue with, you know, as they say. And it says, the proposal represents exceptional quality and innovative design and so on. And when I was looking at it last night, and some of the designs and so on, and you know, I hate to knock it down, but it reminds me of Picasso's painting with all the bits and pieces put together of a body. And I thought, and I sort of, my view was reinforced by the view of Mr. Stephen Locke, you know, the member of the public, that, you know, perhaps it is too innovative, too avant-garde, too forward-looking, or whatever you like to call it. Like I said, you know, I've been often been accused of being an old-fashioned and traditionalist, and design and innovative. So I'm not too sure if, you know, with the design and that kind of forward-looking, you can say, or backward-looking, or whatever it is, I'm not too sure that I would be happy. And I hear the officers, and I thought officers did spend a lot of time sort of convincing us to say design is the one that we should be going for it, and perhaps she protests too much. And on that, just on the design, just on that, I am not too sure. I don't think that it would be in keeping with the Lily Shell, because after all, Lily Shell is our, you know, lots of people come around there from, we have a sports centre and people travels around. And I don't want anybody to turn around and say, what the hell is that? When somebody drives past it, and then they say, oh, tell you what, Councillor Sahota voted for that one there. You know, one of my grandchildren sort of walks around it. So I'll give you the reason as well. And the reason is I don't think it will be in keeping with the Lily Shell area, and I know it well. So I got a problem with the design, Mr. Chairman. I like to stop there.
Okay. Councillor Dugmore?
Yeah, so I'll come on to the design later, but just going through the report, I mean, it's sort of just concerned about the enforcement. There was supposed to be the site was supposed to be restored, and the planning inspector, we go through all the rigmarole, and the planning inspector said it should be restored, and it hasn't been restored. And yet again, we had this with the school. A condition hasn't been enforced. Why hasn't it been enforced? I mean, we shouldn't even be considering this, because until the land is restored back to how it's supposed to be, well, then it's not ready for redevelopment, and this is just a way of getting out of having to restore it back to how it was. And on page 42, there seems to be some queries about this watercourse. Is there a watercourse there, or isn't there a watercourse there? Because even the Design Midlands people made a point about the watercourse. In fact, there's a very confusing bit in the report, which I'd like some clarity on when I can find it. 8.9.2. Officers did attend the Design Midlands panel meeting to observe the discussion and set the planning context. In response to the objection regarding the reference to the watercourse in the panel's letter, the applicant did confirm twice during the panel review that this was not the case, but seems to have been mistakenly included as part of the letter. Well, I'm afraid that didn't really mean very much to me, because I was getting a bit confused about it. So if we could have some clarity on that paragraph, that might help to clear up about whether or not there is a watercourse or there isn't. Now, on page 46, 8.2.10, sort of as the public speaker pointed out, parish and town councils are urged to have a neighbourhood plan. And being a parish councillor myself, I know how much work goes into that. And we consult all the residents, etc. And a lot of work goes into it at all levels. And as a planning authority, we encourage town and parish councils to have a neighbourhood plan and to adopt a neighbourhood plan. So Lily Shaw have dutifully done that, and here we are, we're going to ignore it. So what's the point of having a neighbourhood plan? We're just going to take no notice of it. Now then, coming on to the exceptional quality and innovative design, and I think avant-garde is a very, very good way of describing it. Now then, okay then, take the point, sort of, what one person thinks is fantastic, another person doesn't. And quite honestly, sort of it seems a bit odd to me, but anyway, sort of, you only need to look at the Scottish Parliament to see, sort of innovative design. And certainly the report seems to whoever's written it seems to be watching a lot of Kirsty and Phil, because we're getting a load of what's palimpsest of landscape. And we had the other word, what was that biophilic design and everything. So I think, sort of, Kirsty or Phil could have written that, because it's, sort of fantastic. Now, but the weird thing is, and what I struggled to work out, that okay then, so somebody if somebody wanted to have a traditional design on there, it would be automatically refused. But if somebody wants to put something which a lot of people might consider as being very weird and avant-garde, well then all of a sudden we can seriously discuss it. Surely the point is should we build on that bit of land, or shouldn't we build on that bit of land? It should be immaterial as to what it looks like. Fundamentally, we need to decide whether or not that land is going to be built on. And time again, it's been refused. Now then, the thing is that we're told in the report that the design is supposed to takes note of the lime kilns. Well, we've seen a picture of the lime kilns. It looks nothing like a lime kiln. Nothing at all. If it was a hobbit hole, then it would look a bit more like a lime kiln. Now then we come to Fernley and trying to justify the fact that this is in the village. Well, I've got the map here, and it's very clear that it's not part of the village, and in fact, on the map that was shown on there, Fernley is actually inside of Barrack Lane. It's not on the outside. In fact, there's nothing other than the dairy farm. If you go either east, north, or whichever direction it is, towards the dairy farm. Now then, we were told during the presentation that the design will, that the specialist officer was quite happy that the design would keep out pests and noise, etc. Well, how the hell does any design keep out rats from a dairy farm? How's it going to? Are the rat traps built into it? What? We're told that the applicant has done this, the noise monitoring. Well, what time of year was that done? Because obviously the noise levels, any farm, the noise levels are going to be different at different seasons. So have we got noise monitoring at different times of the year so that we can see whether or not, because not all farmers are out at 3:30 every morning. They might be out even earlier than that. So we don't know. Now then, and finally, we come to how many letters of support and how many object. So the report says there was 15 in support and 87 to object. So what are the percentages of how many of those were outside the village? Because that would be quite interesting to find out, to see what the level of objection is to it. But so quite honestly, I remember the previous applications on this site, and nothing's changed my mind to allow development on this site, and so I can't support it.
Yes, Gemma.
Can we move the application, please?
Thank you, Chair. Right, Councillor Sahota, I'll try and start with yours first. I note your opinion that is too innovative. It did go to the design review panel twice, because the first time they didn't think it was good enough for the site. So they did undertake that second process with it to make sure that it's achieved the policy that is contained in the local plan. It might be helpful to explain a little bit more about why the dwellings look the way they do. And they do have a large number of environmental credentials with this. So in order to be a lower carbon development and use less energy, they have passive mechanical ventilation, and they use solar gain and wind harnessing. Now, because they've used a design that's inspired by the lime kilns, not designed to look exactly like them, but inspired by them, what the natural cowl shape enables the buildings to do is to pull the warm air up and then redistribute it throughout the house. So it's a way of cooling and heating buildings that relies on a lower carbon type of energy. And that is all part of why they are shaped the way they are. In terms of the visuals of the site and where you would see it from, it's quite limited actually. There's the public right-of-way that runs alongside, although as you've seen from the photographs, they would just be glimpse views. The main view would be from Wilmore Lane to the south, but again, that's at such a distance, and the site is so enclosed between the trees that it's very difficult to see them from anywhere. Councillor Dugmore, the enforcement notice, there were a number of parts to the enforcement notice, and I can confirm the applicant has complied with all of them with the exception of two, and that was because the application was in and it's consistent with the local planning authority's approach that where it may become something that's part of a development, it's not considered expedient to take action against that. So I can confirm everything else has been complied with. I wouldn't describe it as that. It's something that local planning it's a common practice to deal with it that way. In terms of the watercourse, yes, it was something that was flagged up as one of the objections, that this watercourse was mentioned, and it conflicted with what the agent had filled in on the application form, so I had to put a line in the report about it. It is a mistake by one of the panellists. She was advised twice during the second design review meeting, I think, that there was no separate watercourse, but I think she got confused with the history of the canal being there, and somehow in the letter being drafted, it's made its way in there. So it's as simple as that. It was a mistake on their part.
Okay.
I think 8.2.10 was your next paragraph, wasn't it, about the neighbourhood plan?
Mm-hmm.
So as the report explains, we have a development plan. It's made up primarily of the local plan and then any neighbourhood plans that sit underneath that. Now, this application does meet a number of the neighbourhood plan policies. When it comes to Dev 1 and Dev 2, it doesn't say how it's going to handle applications that are applied for under HO 10.3. They're very much heritage-led schemes, so something that sits not directly under that, it's almost moving against what HO 10.3 is designed to do. So they're both relevant policies, both the neighbourhood plan ones and the local plan, and then it's for members to decide where they feel the weight of that planning balance should sit, whether it's with the local plan or whether it's with the neighbourhood plans underneath it. So that's what the report explains. In terms, it's not dismissing the neighbourhood plan, it's saying that the policies have got different aspirations and looking at where that planning balance sits and that judgment. Apologies for the use of the word palimpsest if you did not like it. It means layers, and I already had layers in that sentence, and I couldn't find another way of saying it. So, but palimpsest is when you've got something it's when you've got something that's got many layers to it, and the layers show through from underneath. So it was reflecting what's happening with the landscape and the archaeology and the heritage. So.
I did look it up. I mean, I'm older than you, and I've never heard of it before.
Yes, as you said, residential has been refused on this site before. As the report goes through, there's been significant material considerations that warrant reviewing those decisions that have been made. The key differences between this application and that one is one of them. The other ones have been set out in the report for you. Burnley, it is a material consideration. It has got relevance to this. It was a very recent permission, so again, it's something to be given weight by the committee. In terms of pests and how a design would keep a pest out, I don't think anything in the application is saying that. They did provide the updated pest, noise and odour reports. They didn't find any issues in terms of pests or odour, so that's why there were no mitigation proposals suggested for that. And in terms of the noise monitoring, we obviously have the noise monitoring from previously. In this occasion, it was just done at one time of year. The consultant did advise in the report that he would have expected more noise from feeding animals in barns, that sort of thing. So we have that from the consultant who provided the report, again set against the World Health Organisation noise ratings and the advice of our environmental health specialist. It was found to be acceptable, and that the noise ratings in themselves were okay, and that any mitigation provided by the buildings and anything else on site would reduce it even further.
Okay, Katie?
Yes.
Thank you. Gemma Offland, you want to make a point?
Yes, Chair. Can we move the recommendations, please?
Just a minute. I think the recommendation be moved.
Before anybody said.
Just a moment. Ian, I'll let you come in.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman.
You usually do.
I know you are very expansive in your largesse and in letting us speak.
Yeah, he's lying.
I know that as well, Chairman. Right. This is a difficult one to consider. Having been here a few years, I can remember the previous applications for this site and the refusals. which were taken with due regard to the relevant local plan, and also the application for Fernley, which were taken in regard to the latest local plan. So, looking at the current local plan and the Lillishall local plan, which has to be taken into account, and the national planning policy, it is quite clear that this site is, to my mind, in my interpretation, this is not an infill site. Whereas Fernley definitely is, because it's on the main road. This is on a spur off the main road. Because I remember when we did the site visit to Fernley, I had to drive up and down Barrett Lane and try to find somewhere to park, and it was very difficult, and I had to walk a long distance in the end to get to the site. And I spotted the entrance down to this piece of land that we're talking tonight, and this is not an infill site. So the only reason that we could grant this, it would seem, from the report, is that this satisfies policy HO10, subparagraph 3, that it's of a dwelling of exceptional quality and innovative design. So I had to have a look at it in detail, look at the plans, look at the representations, the elevations of these buildings, and unlike my colleague, I don't watch Kirsty and whatever his name is. I watch Grand Designs quite a lot, which does have buildings of exceptional design. And I've watched it for a number of years. And we've seen some very interesting designs also occasionally appear before us at this committee. In my opinion, this is not an exceptional design. I mean, there's a claim it's sort of to reflect the lime kilns. Well, having looked at the pictures provided by the officer of the lime kilns as they now are, these proposals look nowhere like it at all. Absolutely not. And in fact, to use a phrase by a certain member of the Royal Family, they look like carbuncles on the face of the landscape, and thus I do not consider them to be acceptable, and I feel this application should be refused, Chairman.
Thank you, Ian. Well, the recommendations have been moved. Is the seconder for that? You've got a seconder for that? Oh, no, yeah. So I've got a seconder for that, yes. Okay. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. All those against? Abstentions? It's 2 abstentions. It's 3 each. I think, having looked at the site this afternoon, it's actually it's not overlooked anywhere. The only problem would be the access lane, but that can be overcome by negotiations. I think it ought to be allowed. In favour of the recommendation, okay? I did it. If anybody wants to disappear and ask other people to come in, we'll have another 2-minute break, of course. Right, let's get back to it then. It's TWC 2020/1056 and it's land north east of Sturtley Interchange, Nedge Hill. Penny?
Thank you, Chair. This is an outline planning application for the residential development of land north east of Sturtley Interchange, Nedge Hill. The application is for up to 350 dwellings on a site of approximately 42 hectares with all matters reserved for local approval. The proposed development is an allocated housing site which has been earmarked for development for many years, going back as far as the Newtown Master Plan of 1965 and thereafter approved under the subsequent New Towns Act. Land to the north of Nedge Lane, which forms part of this application, is currently leased by the Riding Centre, but this has always been leased on a short-term basis with it borne in mind that the land is allocated for development. The current lease expires in 2023 and the applicants have confirmed that it will not be renewed beyond this point. Whilst at this stage the master plan is only illustrative, there are a number of key features incorporated into the design which we'd expect to come forward with any reserved matters applications, as is set out in section 8.3 of the report. Of particular note, the proposed access to the development will be formed by a new 4-arm roundabout on Halesfield 1, with comprehensive modelling and preliminary safety assessments having already been undertaken. Additionally, it is intended that Nedge Lane will be subject to a stopping up order and downgraded to create a sustainable pedestrian and cyclist corridor towards Sturtley and its local facilities. The development fully meets the requirements to provide contributions directed through the local plan, and the applicants have submitted a draft Section 106 agreement which encompasses the contributions set out at para 4.1 of the committee update report. It is therefore recommended that members grant delegated authority to grant outline planning permission subject to the conditions and financial contributions set out within the report.
Thank you, Penny. Councillor Greg C. Sinclair.
Yeah, just going to change my glasses. Okay, I speak on behalf of Sturtley and Brookside Parish Council and equally for the campaign for the protection of rural England in equal measure. Anyone that's taken the time to read the responses to this application cannot ignore the overwhelming negativity to the development. Telford is proud to be a town built in a forest, so we've been told. Why has this been completely disregarded since 1995? And why is this development a sad continuation of the current theme? 300 houses were originally the original development quantity for this site, oversubscribed in the local plan in 2015 when compared to government figures, and now bumped up to 350 without empirical evidence to support the need. Why is this? The development to the south of Nedge Lane creates an effective wall to the movement of wildlife from east to west and back. The builders have given no consideration in the design to compensate for wildlife movement or the effects of light pollution. Will this committee rectify this failing? If not, why not? Local services such as doctors and dental surgeries in the serving parishes at Hollingswood and Ranelagh, Sturtley and Brookside are oversubscribed with no room for expansion. The schools too are at capacity. Nedge Farm Riding Centre plays an important role in the community, which has included supporting children with disabilities to be able to carry out recreational sports. The current housing capacity and distribution will effectively end the business. I also understand that it's the only one in Telford that does this sort of service. The junction of Halesfield Industrial Estate with the A442 at Sturtley Interchange is already a congestion point that produces excessive amounts of CO2 and other pollutants. This development can only add considerably. Has this been recognised? Will the committee recognise that? If housing goes ahead, there is a need to see contributions in the design for green measures, such as solar panels, electric car charging points, water runoff and reuse. We see very little of that anywhere in Telford developments. Sturtley and Brookside
parish and the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England are against this application.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Nathan England.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I am Nathan England, Borough Councillor for the Nedge Ward. I am here this evening to represent the views of my residents and local business owners who have made it quite clear to me that they're against this planning application. We know that this is just not good enough justification for a rejection of the application, so to look at some justified reasons to object, I have the following points. Highway safety, road users who will need to negotiate two islands very close together, a new island and Sturchley interchange. Pedestrians and bicycles already struggle to negotiate the passing places on the interchange, both forms of transport that are being encouraged. After all, the council has declared a climate emergency. Traffic generation. A new small island is required. Being so close to Sturchley interchange will cause significant issues and cause gridlock at key points throughout the working day. There is already long tailbacks around this area, and additional stationary vehicles will cause further delays and unnecessary pollution. Flood risk. So the Atkins flood risk assessment shows a clear risk of flooding to the site. There is some clarity required around the percentages used in their formulas. The Environment Agency has suggested 35% increase on calculations for climate change, not the 20 or 25% used within the reports. The existing area is almost always wet and boggy, in my opinion, and suitable for being built on. So archaeology. Within the Atkins Heritage Statement, it states that the illustrated master plan indicates one hedgerow that may be classified as important under the hedgerow regulations. Archaeology and historic criteria will be removed by the proposed development. The Historic Action Team at Shropshire Council has had an opportunity to review the geophysical survey report for comments on anomalies found within the report. They did this, and I note the following statement. In light of the above in relation to paragraph 199 of the NPPF, it is advised that phase programme of archaeological work be made a condition of any planning permission for the proposed development. Phase 1 of this programme of archaeological work should comprise of field evaluation in the form of limited and targeted trial trenching of the proposed development site prior to construction commencing, with further archaeological mitigation thereafter if deemed necessary. An appropriate condition of such consent would be suggested conditions: no development approved by this permission shall commence until the applicant or their agents or successors entitled has secured the implementation of a phased programme of archaeological work in accordance with the written scheme of investigation. This written scheme shall be approved in writing by the planning authority prior to commencement of works. Reason is the site is known to hold archaeological interest. So to summarise in 20 seconds, road safety, traffic congestion, please have a site visit with yourselves to see where the new island's going to go. You will see easily the carnage that this will cause at key points of the day. Flooding, please use a 35% increase as suggested by the Environment Agency. Archaeology, unnecessary removal of historic hedgerow, recommendation from the Historic Action Team for trial trenches. I respectfully request that you take the time to delay a decision on this planning application to see the site for yourselves.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Kay Curtis, please.
Good evening. I'm Kay Curtis. I own the Nedge Farmhouse, and I'm also representing the Nedge Farm Riding Centre, of which this development will have a significant impact. There are many anomalies in this application which have not been presented in the agenda. However, I'm here to reject the proposed development, and my points are: firstly, I can't get Telford Wrekin are applying to Telford Wrekin for outline planning permission for the development. Is this not a conflict of interest? With reference to the Telford Wrekin local plan of January 2018, the site was allocated for up to 300 dwellings. The proposal is now up to 350 dwellings, which conflict and exceed those within the original plan. The Heritage have objected to the development north of Nedge Lane due to the farmhouse being of significant, building of significant history. Could you clarify, please, I don't know if Penny can help here, 8.55, which states that the current lease for the Nedge Farm Riding Centre expires early 2023, and that is confirmed by applicants that it will not be renewed. The applicants have made no such confirmation with the leaseholder of Nedge Farm Riding Centre. The lease is in the hands of Homes and Community Agency. Are the applicants saying that Nedge Farm Riding Centre will cease to exist from early 2023, or will the lease still be in the hands of Homes and Community Agency, who have said that they see no reason why the lease should not continue to the north of the farmhouse, regardless of this application? From looking at the comments on the application and my own comments I made, it appears that the farm and agriculture traffic will pose many problems. A solution could be to reduce the amount of dwellings north of Nedge Lane from 350 to 300, as originally stated in 2018 plan. Therefore, remove Plotty, the 49 dwellings. This would enable Nedge Lane to remain open for access to the house and to the Nedge Farm Riding Centre. The positive outcomes for both our parties would be that the land could be retained for grazing and community recreation, enabling the riding school to continue serving the community at full capacity. The availability for your prospective residents to access use of the riding school would not surely enhance the development you are proposing and the well-being for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kay. Dave Stengel, please, the applicant's agent.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Thank you for your time this evening and the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicant for the proposed development at the Hem, a site included within the Telford land deal, a partnership between Homes England, the Council and the Marchers LEP. We fully support the recommendation for approval which has been put forward by officers for this outline planning application that would deliver up to 350 new high-quality homes of a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedrooms. It will realise the potential of one of the largest residential site allocations within the Telford and Wrekin local plan and provide a significant contribution to the housing need identified through Policy H01. The site affords the opportunity to create a vibrant, sustainable and well-integrated new neighbourhood incorporating 23.4 hectares of open space, off-street parking for each plot, enhanced pedestrian, equestrian and cycling connections through to Sturchley, and space for both formal and informal play space for the benefit of both new and existing residents. The illustrative master plan responds to the site's challenging topography and will unlock access to the natural features of the site, including Nedge Brook and the neighbouring woodland, through the creation of footpaths and providing permeability to the natural areas of the site. Through discussions with landscape officers, suitable buffer zones have been incorporated into the master plan to neighbouring properties, existing woodland and to the river habitat to allow a cohesive development defined by a green spine running through the site, linking areas of woodland to the north and the south of the site. Engagement has been undertaken with the necessary consultees to develop an appropriate ecological mitigation measures to support a future reserve matters application, and an initial biodiversity net gain assessment has been undertaken on the outline proposals, which indicates that well in excess of 10% biodiversity net gain could be provided on the site as part of the final application. The outline design has been subject to a Building for Healthy Lives assessment developed by Homes England, which provides guidance to support placemaking for healthier, more integrated communities and to ensure that the guiding principles are in place to deliver the highest quality of residential development for the future reserve matters applications. These principles include creating integrated environment, homes for everyone, well-defined and navigable places with a sense of character, and the promotion of healthy living through the improvement of pedestrian routes and improved access to the natural environment. The scheme would improve the road network, ensuring the new residential development can suitably integrate with existing commercial uses to the south of the site and improve connections through Sturchley through the downgrading of Nedge Lane to create a sustainable and pedestrian-friendly corridor. Finally, comprehensive discussions with planning officers have taken place to develop a suitable set of Section 106 contributions totalling in the region of £2.2 million to support Telford and Wrekin's wider development aspirations, including contributions towards education, highways improvement, woodland management, open space and a policy-compliant 25% affordable housing provision. I would urge members to support Officer's recommendation for approval of this scheme, which would bring a significant benefit to Telford and Wrekin. Thank you.
Thank you. Penny?
There's quite a few points there that I think the majority of them are sort of considered within the report, but I'll try and do a bit of a whistle-stop tour on each of them, and then if members feel that they want any further information, we can go from there. So in terms of the proposed yield, obviously in the local plan it is an indicative yield of 300. That's been based on local plan site assessments using a generic sort of 60% of the site area to be developed. What the applicants have put forward is up to 350, so for reserve matters to come forward and demonstrate that it is possible to accommodate 350 dwellings on the site. So we are putting a limit on that as up to 350, but the local plan only stipulates an indicative yield and doesn't have that maximum amount. In terms of the impact on wildlife, that has been considered at length by our ecological officer. As the agent mentioned, there is a biodiversity net gain of in excess of 10%. I actually think it's 18% for the majority of the site. And policy NE1 actually only requires that there's no net loss. So we're not at the point where the environmental bill's reached the point where it's statutory required to get the 10%, but they have offered that in excess of the 10%. In terms of the riding centre loss, whilst we obviously acknowledge the concerns of the objector speaking today and other residents that have objected to the scheme, the matter of the lease is a civil matter, and it's something that has been confirmed to me by the applicants, and that's Homes England included, that the lease will not be renewed upon 2023, and that's all I can really advise on that respect. In terms of green measures that was mentioned, I think, by the parish councillor, that is outlined in quite a lot of detail within the applicant's design and access statement and their commitment for any future reserve matters. You know, all sorts of things: solar orientation, wind sheltering, solar panels, electric charging points. That they have a commitment to provide that. In terms of highway safety, there were pre-application discussions about how the site would be accessed. We looked at various options with our highways engineers, including a signalled junction. But the four-arm roundabout was essentially to sorry, give me a moment, to future-proof the site and the surrounding area. The roundabout was deemed the most pragmatic approach for going forward, really, and was more commensurate with the design of the highway network in that area. In terms of a risk of flooding, the majority of the site is in flood zone 1. There are areas that run along the Nedge Brook in the centre of the site that are flood zone 2 and 3, but would be separated some distance from the proposed housing areas. But I should just advise the Environment Agency didn't object to the application, but they did just ask that any future reserve matters look at betterment on top of that as well. I think there was mention of important hedgerows as well. Obviously we are looking just at an illustrative master plan at the moment, but I have included an informative on the application that ensures that all veteran trees, ancient hedgerows and mature trees are retained as part of any reserve matters application, and that they're therefore protected in any design coming forward. Give me a moment. In terms of the archaeological, the applicants did submit a written scheme of investigation. They also undertook some geophysical surveys, and some small anomalies were evidenced in that, and then the Shropshire Council have conditioned that they are happy with those, and that, as mentioned, any future works would be undertaken prior to commencement. Just checking there's nothing else that I've missed. No, I think that's everything, Chair, but more than happy to.
Welcome to the committee. Councillor Fletcher, then Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, a clarification. Who actually is the applicant? Is it Homes England or is it Telford Wrekin Council? Right. Well, if it's Telford Wrekin Council, I understand from earlier on that they can't have a Section 106 agreement with themselves. Perhaps the legal officer could explain why this is asking for a Section 106 then.
Yes, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. The Section 106s are entered into between the owner of the land and the local planning authority. I'm assuming the owner of the land is Homes England. So even though there's a joint application, there's a single owner and it's not the council.
Thank you for that clarification. Right. My main concern is that this is a development of up to 350 houses. As the applicant's agent said, this is a large development, not some of the large as the ones in Prisley, but it's quite a size. But there are no facilities on the site. There are no shops, no doctors, no schools even. It's just houses. And in paragraph 8.6.12 it says doctors and local convenience shops are within a 20-minute walk. If I remember from the local plan, those facilities have to be, I think, within 400 metres of any development. And I don't think people can walk 20 minutes walking is a lot more than 400 metres. So it would, to my mind, not satisfy our local plan and therefore should be refused. Perhaps the officer could check on that for me. It's a few months since I last read it. We've had too much COVID trouble. The other thing is that I note that the lovely brook going down the middle, they're talking about culverting that brook. But the report says that, and I think our policies say, we don't want brooks to be culverted because that causes problems. As I know from in my ward where they had a lovely big culvert that got a load of rubbish in it, and it cost nearly £500,000 to get sorted. Luckily we got a grant from the Employment Agency rather than the council, so I don't want us to have problems like that. And finally, the Lodge Farm. Sorry? Ned Farm, sorry. Yeah, I'm thinking some. The fact that it's a recognised value in the area, and this development's going to impede on it, I don't think it should be allowed. So I'm having concerns whether I can support this application. Perhaps the officer, when he's finished looking, can let me know the answer to my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Mr. Scott.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting to read a lot of comments on social media about this particular application, and people clearly don't know that it's been designated for some kind of development for about, I don't know, 50 years. So we shouldn't be surprised something's going to happen there. A few things that sort of I'd like clarification of. We're talking about up to 350 houses. Now, if a developer wishes to win the hearts and minds of people, he could make it up to 300 and save that riding school, which wouldn't be a bad move in terms of working with the people. However, I'm a bit confused about what the situation is. For example, if that were to happen and this developer said, no, we're going to do 300 houses and we'll leave that, I don't know if it's the north or the top end bit, we'll leave that alone, would the riding school still be losing its fields in 2023? That's one question. It's a great opportunity to put electric charging points, and as many as you can get on there. We're not seeing them at the moment, and it's about time that all, if we're going to have to be driving around in electric cars in not too many years' future, it's about time every development had designated charging points. The 25% affordable is good to see, but can we have it written in that we will not accept a developer coming back to us in a few months' time and saying actually it will be 10%, or actually it's not viable anymore, it might be nil? Can we make sure that that 25% is written in? And as Councillor England mentioned, can we make sure that there's an archaeological survey done before any work commences? In general, I am quite comfortable with this being developed as a space. I just feel that there's more work can be done. I'm happy enough to support at this stage, but by the time we get to reserved matters, there's a lot of things that need to satisfy not just this committee but the public in general to make it an acceptable development. And the final question is about doctor surgeries, because as has been mentioned by Councillor Fletcher, there isn't one. And what we're doing here is we're building a village, really. So I'd just like to know, and I think I know the answer because we did touch on it yesterday at the site visit. Did the CCG come forward with any kind of hope that the 106 would include money as they did in the Iron Bridge application? Was there any discussion at all about surgeries? And simply put, why has it been left out?
Yeah, I think this application comes with multiple concerns, I think, based on around the further information I think that has already been stated by the committee that's needed. One being that we have a community facility being a riding school that has benefited local people for some time now. I for one have been up there on many occasions at 7 AM in the morning, so what a riding school does for the community is an actual benefit. If we are putting multiple houses on and 350 is excessive for where it is, I feel, because on what impact it has access wise as well. You know, this is what I class as being a countryside, country scenery that should be kept for local amenities for local people. So I cannot vote for this, given the information that we've got in front of us.
Yes, I'll try and come back on a few of the points mentioned. In terms of the 400 metre distance to facilities, the policy actually relates to the resultant loss of shops and communities, and therefore there being 400 metres to any, not necessarily for new development. So the new development has gone through the local plan process for a number of years, a number of consultations, and has been deemed to be a sustainable location. In terms of the culvert, yes, preferentially we don't want to see any watercourses culverted, but there is an exception within the policy that unless it is essential to the provision of access, which in this case it is. We have looked at that in some detail with the applicants and the drainage officers content that they're happy with the application as it stands, but with further details to come forward with the reserved matters application in terms of modelling any flood compensation areas and the like. Just check. Again, in terms of the lease, it's not really something I can comment on. It's something that is outside of the planning process. Really, we can only look at the application as it stands. The lease is due to expire. We've been advised that it won't be renewed, and we're just looking at the application as it is and as it is allocated in the local plan as well. So that is the same boundary as is allocated in the local plan. In terms of the doctor's surgery, as you rightly said, Peter, we did discuss that on site. The CCG have not made any requests for any contributions for this site, unlike they did on the Iron Bridge Power Station. The local plan allocation does not require such facilities on the site because it is considered to be sustainable and be able to reach those local facilities that are in the area as it currently stands. And then access, I think I've probably already mentioned in terms of what the Highways Authority's input is and how they feel that that's appropriate at this stage. As I say, there have been detailed modelling of it. There obviously is an increase on the A442 in terms of impact. I think it's 2 to 3% increase at peak hour. But other routes are considered to be minimal. Safety audits suggest that no existing safety issues have influenced or exacerbated by this development, and they're also contributing towards the Telford Transport Growth Strategy as well. I think that's everything, Chair. Yes. To what, sorry, Peter? Affordable housing. Yep, so affordable housing is being secured at 25% as part of the Section 106 agreement, and the electric charging points, they have been committed through the applicants. We do encourage it now as a council. It's not an adopted part of our policy, but it is coming through in the local plan review. They have provided commitment to it, and it's something that we will be encouraging through the Reserved Matters application.
So can we strengthen that 25%?
In terms of how would you like to see it strengthened?
Well, I just like to think that whatever comes forward as a Reserved Matters, because as I say, personally I'm okay with the general intention to develop that land. I would like it to be 25% when it comes forward and not slip off somewhere.
Yeah, certainly.
So
well, as I say, the
Section
106 does secure that, and if they were to want to differentiate from that, they would have to seek a variation of condition. That would have to come back to the committee members in any event. So.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Now wants to make a point.
Just want to make a comment in terms of electric charging points. If you've heard in terms of legislation-wise that was coming through, and building regs actually changed today. The circular was published by the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, which introduced that as part of building regulations. There is a transitional period, but this will be, outline application will be followed by a Reserved Matters, and it will be caught by those building regs moving forward.
Did you want to make a comment? Just very quickly, Peter, you can't actually stop developers applying to various Section 106 agreements. It's a statutory right. But as Penny says...
So they could declare right now it's not viable then, couldn't they?
We impose Section 106 planning obligations now, and there's a mechanism, I think Val's mentioned it before, if they're in place for 5 years, after which time the developers have a right to make an application to have them modified. We don't have to accept it, of course, and it comes in, but you can't protect in the way that you'd like, I think.
What about notice anyway? Thank you.
Councillor Dunbar?
Yeah. I thought I'd turned into the invisible man.
Right, we were clear.
Right, so, I mean, this land was always earmarked for development, and the principle of development on it was conceded in 2020, so there's not much we can do to actually stop development on here, although it could have been used as an extension of Halesfield in the future, which might have given a few more years of existing use. I mean, my immediate concern was looking at this was the lack of facilities. I mean, there are no, as has been pointed out, the nearest shop is across the 442 and is the petrol station on the roundabout. And it's not exactly conducive to taking the kids out for some sweets or anything, because it'd be a route march and you'd be gone for nearly a day, I think. So really, I think that there should be some either community, you know, at least a paper shop or something like that, included in this, and perhaps that can be looked at in more detail when the detailed application comes through. I mean, yeah, I mean, as far as doctors' surgeries goes, I mean, well, even if they do build one, you can't see a doctor, so, you know, what's the point? But yeah, I mean, the NHS, it will take a long time to get any facilities, and quite frankly, the development's not big enough. I am concerned on we've had the update with the conditions, and on condition 4.13, we've got financial contribution towards secondary education provision at a cost of, I'm assuming that should be £1988.12 per dwelling, but it doesn't actually say that. So I think that should be put in there. And of more concern is 13 over the page. and it says an implementation timetable for on-site NEAT provision or financial contribution towards either a partial or entire off-site enhancement towards local NEAT provision. Well, that's got to be removed, because you couldn't have an off-site NEAT. I mean, none of the residents there would be able to use it because it's so far away. I mean, you know, you might as well take the kids to the town centre in the car. I mean, it's ridiculous. So, I mean, that needs to be taken out, because there shouldn't be any financial, any monies from this development should be spent on that site, because it is isolated and it is away from the rest of the built-up area. And that is ridiculous for it to be able, for that money to be spent elsewhere, which will only benefit which won't benefit any of the residents of that development at all. Now, 2 quick points. I'm a bit confused as to what's happening with Nedge Farm and how you get to Nedge Farm once the development's built. Where's that map gone? Ah, there we go. See, here's my Debbie McGee. There you go.
Safely enough.
So, because the thing is that it looks like the farm's isolated. So is this road that goes up from Nedge Lane through this new development, is that the access now to Nedge Farm? Yeah, okay. So the thing is that you know, this tree, this field with trees, which is called proposed feature trees, couldn't that be used for grazing horses? Now, and as you can tell, I haven't ridden for a very, very long time. I mean, where the hell you get Shire horses from nowadays, I don't know. But the thing is, though, that I would have thought that as you know, sort of to try and preserve the community facility, and you know, sort of it will benefit the residents there. Well, then surely if the horses were allowed, nobody's going to complain about having a horse field in the back of their garden, are they? Well, I'd be surprised if they did, unless they're allergic to horses. So can't we sort of condition that, or make sure that that's included, so that at least the horses can, you know, that makes the hopefully would make the riding school sustainable. I mean, it's common sense, isn't it, really? So can't we have a bit of common sense on this?
Just to say that the riding school is very popular, I know, people who use it. And it does say up to 350, you know, so, I mean, could it not just be 300 just to prevent this issue for this business? Because they won't necessarily want to build 350, will they? So if you could just guarantee 300, then the problem would be removed, wouldn't it? And the lack of amenities, the GPs are under enough strain, is how I'd put it, at the moment, and I don't think adding any more strain on services that exist is a very good idea. Although I appreciate there's a lack of funding in services, but yeah, just about how that, because that could be a lot of people in 350 houses that are going to start using all the local services there, which are already quite well populated, aren't they? So that's my point.
Just a couple of points, I think, Chair. I think a lot of it we've discussed previously. In terms of the offer of the NEAP and LEAP that Councillor Dudmore mentioned, the applicants have confirmed that there will be the LEAP on site, and they have also said they want to provide the NEAP on site, and that's shown on the master plan as well. I think the NEAP is located in that central area next to the Nedge Brook. There's sort of a white circle in the middle, and that was illustratively the location for the NEAP. But because of it being located in that area, our Healthy Spaces Officer raised concern about the natural sloping levels, and that sort of ball sports and wheeled sports couldn't necessarily work in that area. So what the contribution seeks to do is hopefully achieve it on site, but if they don't achieve it on site, there would be a partial contribution towards wheeled sports and and ball sports in another location, or if they can't achieve it on site, it would then be a full contribution to that in the vicinity of the site. But the intention is to have it on site, but it's just having those fallback positions should it not be practicable because of the contours of the land. And then just on the strain of services, I would just sort of reiterate to members really that this is an allocated housing site that has gone through various rounds of public consultation and been deemed acceptable and sustainable, taking account of the facilities that are available in the local area. Something I can't really answer. Obviously the agent's in the room, he can take note of what is being said, but it's not something that we can condition on the application.
Okay. Raj.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at this, sometimes we nudge services out, and the riding school obviously is there. I think we need to take that into consideration. Obviously, whether we defer this, I can't support it at the moment because the riding school does a good job there. I know many people that obviously have had many good times at your riding school, so at the moment I think I can't be supporting this application.
Can you tell them?
Chair, if I may just come in terms of the site itself and its use, that's not something that's in our control in terms of the use and the ownership for that. Okay, that's separate, and we've heard clearly from the owner, which is Homes England, that lease will not be renewed. Okay, the lease in terms of that time period has been well aware for the parties that are involved, and the site itself has been allocated for some time coming forward as part of our housing strategy. Now that housing strategy is very important for us. It has been assessed, it has been tested at public examination with representations made at that time by any interested parties, and that has already gone through an inspector. It is an adopted policy and we must consider that, and therefore the principle of development for housing has been accepted, and we are considering that in line with that policy. So we are looking specifically then at the use, the numbers that are coming forward. That again is allocated within the local plan. If we choose to ignore that, well then we're choosing to ignore material considerations, okay? And you must have a very good reason for doing so. So from my point, we have to consider this as that housing allocation. Is it appropriate in terms of what you're getting for the actual mitigation measures that are coming forward, the proposals in terms of those conditions and the Section 106 agreements?
Okay. Did you say something, Peter?
Move it. Second it.
Move and second the recommendation. All those in favour, please show. No good option, really. Those against? That's 5-4 against. So what grounds are we turning it down on, given it was a Section 1, the 7-1 agreement confirmed in 1990?
Chair, can I ask in terms of whether it is for a refusal or whether it's for anything else?
Yeah. Is it a refusal or anything else? Mel, do you want to explain that?
So you've just moved.
So I think most of the comments from the committee against are actual around, one was local amenities, there's issues there, so, and sustainability within the area. So whether that consists of the riding school as well, of which we've already discussed that can't be considered and can't be put in, but however there is still an issue around local amenities. So you know, we say 350 houses, but it's 350 houses with multiple occupants in that adds to the area, and whether that's been tried or tested, we already know that the local amenities are overrun. So I think that's for.
In terms of just coming back around sustainability, local plan and its allocation has taken that into account and considers what's appropriate to come forward on that site. So we've already got a policy which is showing us that it is sustainable and what's expected from there.
Does that take into account the circumstances we're living in currently?
2018 was the adoption of the local plan.
A lot's changed medically since then, hasn't it? You know, in terms of like our resources medically locally. So that for me would be 2018. You could see your GP go to A. You know, there's a lot changed, doesn't there?
Now the CCG has an option in terms of being able to come forward on any application. They choose not to. So there's no request from the CCG to provide any form of medical facility within the site or any contributions for it. And that's typical within Telford that they don't request that.
I'm quite concerned as well that these riding stables ladies don't seem to know that they're not getting their lease renewed.
That's not in consideration. We can't do much with that one. That's a civil matter, yeah. Peter?
Yeah, I just think we're wrong to refuse at this stage, to be honest. I think we've all voiced what we feel in terms of the riding school, for example, and there's no guarantee, of course, in 2023 whether they'll still be given their the space to use.
Can I make a suggestion?
We're not finished, yeah, if I may. And I just think that there's an opportunity here for the applicant to come forward with something that's far more suitable, in which case, if that's the point, we would then say yes or no. So I think it's an inopportune time to refuse.
Well, I'm about to say, Peter, that we're turning down, we're refusing, and it's been given an Act of Parliament, the 7.1 housing thing, and we're up against it because they just put it in. So I'm going to suggest that we do defer and get more information and ask the applicants to come back and address the points that have been made. Ian, do you want to say something different?
You jumped the gun, Chairman. I was just going to say that in light of the feelings of the meeting, which was tending towards a refusal, I was going to propose that we have a deferment of the plan for the officers to go back to the applicant to express the concerns that have been, to pass on to them the deep concerns of the members of the committee about the lack of facilities, the access and things like that, and for them to come back with revised plans. Because we recognise that the Regulation 7.1 approval for housing is still actually relevant, and they could actually build houses without any problem.
Yeah.
But that's the point. A full recommendation. So
it's been moved that we defer for more information. Well, in favour of that? Are you in favour of deferring, Nigel? Thank you.
Just
is what's been outlined is lack of facilities.
As regards reasons for deferral, we have comment on the riding school. You just want to comment on that. I think it's been explained as regards its relevance, but I think a comment on that.
That's the case.
And I think we also talked about lack of facilities and access. Are we clear about what access means? Are you someone said?
Access to the riding school.
Oh, right, okay.
I want to make sure that that we don't close down a business from the actions that we take.
It is a bigger access issue, I suppose, in the sense of cars, because, like I said, we go like there's same with local amenities. There's 350 potential houses. Houses have X amount of cars now, so that could potentially be up to 900 cars, 900 people, or how many people live in the houses on that stretch.
That's been modelled, and so we're satisfied technically that that's acceptable and that's mitigation has been put forward.
So it's that won't be what will be put out on social media when there's traffic building up at whatever time and where we get hit with what's happening in our local communities. So
Yeah.
it may have been measured, but how it's measured is.
Are you requesting a further comment on the highway's impact? Is that what you're wanting?
Yes.
Would the members agree with that? Yeah.
And the points have been raised. We want answer back. Okay? Thank you. Tina received 2021-0684, and I think we'll have a 2-minute break because I've been sat here long enough now. Welcome back to the meeting. We're now on to 2021-0684, 25 Pinewoods Church, Aston.
Thank you, Jeff. So a member site visit took place this afternoon to view development from the application site itself, alongside that of the immediate neighbouring property. Members of this committee will also have received a written update which references additional matters and responds to a series of points outlined within the committee report. The application site itself is a domestic property within the predominantly residential area of Pinewoods within Church Aston. The application is a retrospective application for the erection of an outbuilding within the rear garden of 2025 Pinewoods, following planning permission having been granted for the erection of a smaller outbuilding in November 2020. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Andrew Eade.
A minute, he'll get back as quick as he can.
Simon Wilmot then.
I can.
Pretty tight on the last one. Right. Well, first of all, I'd like the committee to note this is a retrospective planning application due to material changes between what has actually been built in comparison to the delegated planning permission originally granted by officers for this extension. I also want to point out that those original proposals did not meet with any objections whatsoever, and that had that permission been complied with, we wouldn't, or me in particular, I wouldn't be sitting here now. I have concerns with what's actually been built on site. Not only is it non-compliance with the original permission, but also it's non-compliance with policy BE2, in particular paragraphs 2 about respecting the character of the locality of an area, paragraph 4 concerning the adverse effect on the amenity of a neighbouring property, certainly as the development site is higher than the neighbouring garden, and finally paragraph 7 regarding light pollution. We should note that under permitted development rights, if an outbuilding is within 2 metres of a boundary, the height cannot exceed 2.5 metres, which is the current building does by a full half metre. It's 3 metres high. That increased height, in conjunction with the large grey soffit, undeniably does have an adverse effect on number 26, as members that have been on the site visit will have seen for themselves. Also, the installation of external lights under that fascia cause a level of light pollution which undoubtedly will impact on the amenity of the neighbouring property, again as members will have seen. The general adverse effect is also accepted by the planning officer within his conclusion, and while his expressed sympathy with occupants of the neighbouring property is welcome, it's not enough, I don't think, to mitigate impact on the neighbouring residences themselves. Also acknowledged by the planning officer is that the large fully open triple doors at the front of the building do cause an element of overlooking into the garden of number 26, and also views directly into the kitchen of the property, together with views into the upper floor bedroom windows. I don't think any obscuring of the glass in the doors will of course help. Well, it will help, but completely ineffective, as when the doors are open, of course, those views will still remain into the neighbouring property. I note the request that doors be amended so that only one opens. However, that hasn't been agreed by the applicant. So, members, I repeat again, really, my opening marks on this, that a planning permission was applied for and granted for a building extension, and that it didn't meet with any opposition from neighbouring properties at all. And so, consequently, I would ask you to consider refusing this retrospective application, and so that the building reverts back to the original permission granted by council officers.
Thank you, Andrew. Simon Wilmot, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. This retrospective application is in contravention of Telford Wrekin Local Plan, Section B1 and B2. I would like to draw the committee's attention to the Planning Officer's email dated 23rd of September. Hopefully it's in your packs. This retrospective application now has centralised bifold doors, increasing the glazing area, and has a detrimental impact in terms of overlooking. This is stated by the Planning Officer. New thick fascia and soffit in unapproved dark grey materials gives the impression that the building is higher and the overhang is considerably larger, adding to an overbearing appearance, again as stated by the Planning Officer. Installation of an aircon unit adds to a non-residential feel, again as stated by the Planning Officer. Every aspect of this building has changed from its original application. It's increased by 200 mm in height, 600 mm in length and 1.1 metres in depth. It's been built upon blocks and is elevated. The side window has increased in size by 2.5 times, the soffit has increased by 3 times in size, and the fascia has doubled in size. High levels of light pollution and trespass clearly impact our property and garden amenity. The shed or our building is to be painted in grey and not left in natural timber, and approval was given for 3 metres overall. And it also has a change of use from an office gym to what I believe is an extended lounge and bar. This building is overbearing and dominates our property both inside and out. People can see directly into our kitchen, bedrooms and garden. This was not possible before. This building is elevated and ground levels have increased during construction. The building can be seen from every aspect. It makes us feel we're being watched inside our own home, making us apprehensive even to look out the windows. This is exaggerated even further when the lights are on and people inside and the TV clearly visible. Excessive light is emitted onto our property and garden with noise and music from the lounge/bar and aircon unit which promotes 24/7 use. This is being used late at night in winter months, not as a traditional garden room or office gym as per approval. A building contravention notice has been issued as it does not comply with building regulations. The mass size and magnitude of this building with its grey exterior imposing dark oversized grey fascia and soffit, extended glazed areas and high levels of light pollution and noise impact our daily living conditions. Mitigation measures put forward do not go far enough. Applicants should build what has been approved, not rely on retrospective approval or compare what's being built against permitted development. This is an unauthorised building subject to a contravention notice with a catalogue of issues and should be refused. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Paul Fletcher, please. And oh,
I'll answer anything if it's polite. Thank you.
Thank you. Throughout the lockdown of 2020, inspired by stories of others building additional incidental space within garden buildings, we began to explore the option of replacing our large shed and seating area with an enclosed garden room. Prior to any building work commencing, and having engaged with pre-planning to fully understand the opportunities available to us and applicable rules, we applied for full planning permission for a garden building of the scale, size and site location as that is being discussed today. This permission was granted in November 2020 without objection or concern. With full permission in place, the site was cleared and prepared at the end of 2020 and building work began in earnest as soon as the inclement weather passed early 2021. By this point, I was promoted at work, which led to a revisit of the internal space of the building, and items like bifold doors, which were previously out of reach financially, became an option. With our understanding from pre-planning that the use of the building was not a planning concern, we made what we saw as minor alterations to the building and replaced the French door and window design with bifold doors. In June 2021, following a visit from the planning department, we were advised that the change of door required a completely new planning application. This was a surprise. After all, the scale and size of the building had been approved without issue. However, we saw it as an opportunity to further tweak the original design and submitted our amended scheme for approval. In liaising with the planning officer to secure support for our new scheme, we have largely agreed to realign the building to the fully approved scheme in terms of materials, and also have agreed to several actions which we believe to find the correct balance between mitigating the perceived impact on our neighbour and also protecting our rights to enjoy our property. We urge you to consider the impact of the building in the context that it is not dissimilar in scale to the one for which we have been granted planning permission. So in effect, what we're asking you to consider is whether the marginal difference between the building that the Chair saw on site today and that which could be built under the existing planning permission or under permitted development rights is acceptable. At every stage, from engaging with pre-planning, obtaining the original planning permission and the submission of the new scheme, we've acted reasonably and in good faith. In the context of the relatively small elements above and what could be achieved within permitted development, the previous fully granted planning permission for a building of this size and scale, and our agreement to further mitigate reasonable concerns, I urge you to support the planning officer's recommendation and grant full planning permission for this amended scheme. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Antoinette. Mark, do you want to come back?
Thank you, Chair. So, as has been noted, public representations have been received both in support and objection to the proposed development. Whilst no technical objections have been received, an objection has been received from Councillor Andrew Reid, who has also called the application in, which is the reason it's being considered by the committee today. The external width of the building measures 7.9 metres, depth 5.1 metres, including a 0.3 metre roof overhang on all elevations, and overall height 3 metres. Externally, the building is proposed to be clad on all sides with feather edge board. Internally, the building is one large open plan room, and consequently the front elevation has also been altered to include one large set of fully opening triple patio doors. Whilst it's noted the building is large, the previously approved application and permitted development rights are material planning considerations, and it is considered on balance that the building does not significantly detract from the appearance of the property. With regards to the street scene, due to its location in the rear garden, there are limited views of it when within the street scene. It should be noted that in order to address a number of the concerns raised by the neighbouring property, the applicant has agreed to a series of measures, namely, firstly, installing obscure film to the upper section of the triple bifold doors within the front elevation alongside the high-level window within the side elevation of the building adjacent to number 26, the neighbouring property. Furthermore, a condition is proposed to require the permanent removal of the downlights within the fascia lights within 1 month of any approval. Also removing, as part of that condition, permitted development rights in respect of additional external lighting. To address a number of the issues in terms of privacy and overlooking as well. So the installation of the obscured glazing film in itself, so that would cover the top half of the window when viewed from the front of the building. That in itself would also have an impact in terms of reducing the illumination from inside of the building. It just kind of goes hand in hand with obscure glazing. And to address kind of issues regarding when the doors are open, it's considered during kind of outside of the warm weather, the doors would have a limited time period when they would be open. It would be expected if it's to be used incidental to the main house, it would kind of be a warm environment. Typically those doors would be shut. They would really only be open either in the summer months when people could use the garden typically, or kind of as a small glimpse in time, I suppose, at the top junctures that those doors are open. So the recommendation therefore remains as per the committee report, namely to grant full planning permission subject to the conditions as noted within the committee report.
Can I go for the committee?
Just to clarify one thing, isn't there a policy somewhere that the extension or the building near must not be bigger or to dominate the main building or something?
I mean, in terms of there isn't kind of a policy kind of on that basis. It's each application based on its own merits. It should clearly kind of be, I suppose, ancillary to kind of the main dwelling. This is a building located at the bottom of the garden, and as part of the consideration, the kind of material considerations, you'd be looking at whether the size, scale and nature of that building had an adverse impact upon kind of that neighbouring amenity. So it's kind of covered within policy BE1 of the local plan in terms of how the design is kind of assessed to make sure it is appropriate within that setting.
Yeah, thanks. Well, it's just a shame that this situation has risen, causing friction, etc. Can we just have a confirm what date the original application was granted? Because it says full granted on the 3rd of November 2021.
So yes, that is a point of that's an error within the report. I did come across that today. So the original permission was 13 months ago.
Right, okay. So, I mean, the thing is that, I mean, I don't like retrospective planning permission anyway. The thing that just gets me a little bit is that the size of this building is 30% higher. That's nearly a third bigger than what was actually approved. I mean, we're not talking, the footprint of it is, I've got the figures here. A building of 31.4 metres squared was approved, and this one is 42.6 metres squared. So I mean, we're not talking about, you know, I mean, we've had it before where we've had retrospective and it's been like a few centimetres. Well, this is quite significant. You know, this is a third bigger than what was actually approved, and I'm quite sure that if that size of building had been the original size, well, then it would probably have been refused and been said that it was too big. And this report and everything that we're trying to do is all trying to excuse the fact that we've got a building here which is far bigger than should have been built. Now then, the other point is that I noticed that there's an air conditioning unit. Has there been any noise assessments been done on the air conditioning unit?
In terms of the air conditioning unit, there hasn't been a noise assessment taken from that.
Yeah.
However, domestic air conditioning units are fairly typical with a lot of developments coming forward, predominantly not requiring planning permission. This is a comparable scale and nature of air conditioning unit as could as kind of appears over many residential properties. So I wouldn't consider it necessary or appropriate to require a noise assessment in this instance.
Well, I mean, the thing is that don't forget though that domestic ones are not quite as robust as industrial ones, and so there's usually less soundproofing because they're smaller units, and the size of the motors are in a proportion to the size of the unit is a lot greater. But anyway, so I mean, quite honestly, I can't support this because basically it's far bigger than was approved, and we're not talking about a small amount. We're talking about a third bigger, and I mean that's ridiculous. And you know, sort of, we should be behaving like we should actually be doing what we're supposed to be doing and making sure that there's controlled development, and this isn't. It's out of control. And could you just finally on the update, there's on 2.5 it says officers consider that the building is being used for entertainment purposes for visitors to the main house. It's not a separate use and is incidental to the existing residential property. So can you just explain that to me then, please?
So in terms of so the use of the building, as you would maybe have in your own kind of living room or dining room or whatever it would be within your main house, those kind of function, I suppose, is being utilised within this existing building. It's a use incidental to the existing house. It's part of how would you would typically operate within the primary residential property.
So what activities would constitute the separate use?
Whether it was kind of a business use, which kind of wouldn't fall within the parameters kind of working from home. It's something that potentially could kind of require planning, a separate planning application. So if it was a business of scale, of significant scale, kind of dedicating a portion of that house for that use. So here it is just a use which you could accommodate within the existing property.
So if it was used as a home office, would that be regarded as a separate use?
That would be, again, incidental to the residential use of the property. It comes down to kind of the intensity of that use for that business purpose. If it was someone kind of working from home, like the majority kind of the people at the minute, that's clearly ancillary to such that use. If it was being used for kind of storage and business and manufacturing, then it would kind of take it beyond that ancillary use.
I'm assuming that what we're talking about is we're not creating buildings to rent out for people to sleep in as new accommodation, so HMOs and properties.
And that's proposed to be a condition as well, to ensure that no additional kind of, it's not used for sleeping,
yeah.
And that it does remain incidental.
And had this, just to clear that other point up, was if this application as it is had come to you, would you have passed it as it is?
In terms of the application, it's assessed on its own merits. We would consider applications that are made retrospectively in exactly the same way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor?
These conditions are quite strict, actually. You know, removing of the lights and all this and that, the cladding the lot, you know, after the building. If the developer agrees to it, then I got no problem with it.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Scott?
I mean, the fact that it's not finished doesn't help us in a sense, because you're not really getting the reality of the building as such. It doesn't look right to me somehow, you know, so it sort of spoils my view of it in many ways. But I think with the mitigations that are being put in place, it feels to me mean-spirited to now say to them, you can't have this, tough, we're going to refuse it. I listened to what the officer has said, I've read the conclusion. I tend to agree, so I think I could support this, as it is.
Better?
Yeah, Chair, I'd like to move that we go with this.
You moved it and seconded the recommendations. All those in favour, please show. Those against? 2 against. TWC 2021 1043 Highgrove Meadows, Priorsley. That's yours, is it, Mark, again?
It is, so the application before members today is full application for the erection of a part single, part 2-storey rear extension. The site subject to the application is located on Highgrove Meadows within Priorsley, comprises a detached 4-bedroom property. The development will result in the enlargement of existing rooms, but will not result in the creation of additional bedrooms. Since preparation of the report, no additional representations have been received. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Veronica Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I raise the following concerns to be addressed and ask conditions to be applied. The bedroom extension will cause overlooking from the bedroom windows into the garden amenities of the surrounding properties. See block plan, page 139. 8.4, the report states that the bedroom window is in excess of 24 metres from number 24, and that is acceptable. Does not mention garden amenity space and loss of privacy to the neighbours. 8.8, the report states ground floor extension will cover approximately 2/3 of the original property. This will mean a loss of outside garden space amenity in proportion to the size of the property with no eco gain. 8.17, the report relates to the application for 30 Highgrove Meadows, 17th of November 2021, for retrospective planning permission for ground floor extension, which caused an enormous amount of problems, disruption and noise over 9 months to the neighbours and caused problems for home working during lockdown. This was a misery for 9 months. But this application was granted for a further extension and installation of dormer windows, as well as the granting of the retrospective planning permission. Please note on 817, all planning applications submitted are determined on the merit of each application unless there is a legal requirement. However, if this application is approved, my concern is that the construction on each site could be undertaken at the same time and a huge impact on the surrounding area and neighbours and their amenity space. Therefore, I request that a construction management plan is put in place to cover this, as well as a construction plan to control construction hours. 8.16. 2. Local Highways Authority offers no objection. However, during the 9 months construction at number 30, the cul-de-sac, which is a narrow road, number 30 is on the corner and number 32 is in the cul-de-sac, the road was blocked, causing residents problems by not being able to access the rest of the road in Highgrove Meadows, preventing them from going to work, taking the children to school and other activities. Therefore, I request a traffic management plan, and I ask that you take all these points into consideration when making the determination of this application. Thank you.
Andrew Lane.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'll keep this short and sweet. As you know, this application is recommended for approval. The reason for approval is that it complies with all the planning policy of Telford Wrekin Council. The extension is subservient to the original house, and it's a small extension to the ground floor area. The ground floor area would be compliant with permitted development, and there's a small extension to an existing bedroom and an existing bathroom at first floor. As the planning officer's report states, the extension is in excess of 24 metres from the rear neighbour's property. That is fully in line with good design practice, and if anything it exceeds other new estates which have been approved by the committee in the last few years. The side distance is 14 metres, or in excess of 14 metres from the side neighbour. Again, that is all in line with good design policy. The characteristics of the extension fully reflect the existing house, the eaves details, the hips roofs. Quite simply, it's a perfectly acceptable extension. The applicants are more than willing to accept a condition for construction hours to limit construction time. We understand that the right-hand neighbour created a lot of problems in the locality. Obviously, that extension is nothing to do with this application whatsoever. These applicants are very considerate to their neighbours, and they're more than willing to accept a condition on the construction hours. I would say a traffic management plan and construction management plan is way above any normal house extension requirement. really we shouldn't be here at committee with this application. It's a perfectly acceptable extension, and I think we all need to go home for tea, to be honest. But with respect to the comments made, the hours for construction would be acceptable. Management plan and traffic management plan, I think that's over the top and not acceptable for a minor house extension. Everybody's allowed to extend their house. This should be no different, really. So we welcome the committee's support for approval, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Mark?
Thank you, Chair. So the site lies within the Telford urban boundary where the principle of development is supported. The main considerations in this application are the impact upon residential amenity and the design of the proposed development. In terms of amenity, the extension is located within the property's rear garden. The proposed first floor is not as deep as the proposed single floor extension, and as has been noted, the separation distance to the rear is in excess of 24 metres, and the flank wall is over 14 metres from side neighbours. These separation distances are considered acceptable and will not result in an unacceptable loss of privacy or overlooking. In terms of design, the extension is located to the rear of the property, so there will be no impact upon the street scene. Nevertheless, the proposed extension will replicate the materials and detailing of the main dwelling. The impact of noise, dust and odour during construction was raised by Councillor Veronica Fletcher. Whilst the local planning authority acknowledged that the proposals will result in some level of noise and dust during the construction, this will be limited and temporary. Nevertheless, the applicant has agreed to a condition to control construction hours in the interest of good neighbourliness. Members will recall the planning application at 30 Highgrove Meadows, which has been referenced today, for a front, rear and dormer extension, which received a resolution to grant at committee last month. The positive determination of that application is also a material consideration when considering this application. To conclude then, officers consider the proposal is compliant with policy B1 and B2 of the local plan, and the recommendation to committee remains as per the report to committee. Thank you, Chair.
I agree with Mr. Lane. I don't know why this is here, and I'm happy to move it.
I was going to say what Kelly said, actually. I think Mr. Lane's actually spot on. Why are you bothering to discuss this? It should be okay. It should be passed anyway. So, yeah, if someone wants to move it, I'll second it.
Comments? Councillor Fletcher?
Yeah, well, knowing the location of it and the fact that all the houses around it, I do feel that there is a measure of overlooking from the bedroom window, the new bedroom windows, which are further out from the back than the current ones are, on the surrounding houses. I know the distance is quite large, according to the report, between the houses, and it's not like the little boxes that they build now, where they're all one on top of the other. But there's a question of the contours, where the land does drop down away from these houses to the ones at the back, and there will be an extent of overlooking. And the other thing about construction management, the thing is that this house is on a little, it's on Highgrove Meadows, but it's actually on a sort of like a cul-de-sac off Highgrove Meadows. The plans provided to show are in fact a little bit small, but of the two little diagrams, block plans, the bottom block plan shows that it's a little spur off the main Highgrove Meadows with about 5 houses. And if there is deliveries to this property, and also to the one next door, which was mentioned last time, there could be difficulties for the other neighbours from accessing or egressing to their things. So I think we do have to have some condition to make sure that during the normal access and egress times, i.e. school work time, the working hours of the site should not be allowed, so that people can get to and from work or to and from school. Thank you, Chairman.
That's one of the conditions, construction hours of condition.
Well, construction hours,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be nice as well, but,
Okay.
but the working hours...
Mark, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I think we need to be mindful of the previous application that was considered on the 17th of November. That was for an application where we had similar debate in terms of the construction management plan and the hours. I note the similar dialogue was had in terms of working hours, so as not to conflict with school times and deliveries. And in that case, the restrictions applied for the working hours were down to kind of the typical 8 till 5 or whatever it was, rather than restricting around school hours. So in terms of consistency, I think this application is more off the kind of main road, it's more within the cul-de-sac, so the actual local environment is better and an improvement. So that I would recommend that the proposed working hours are consistent with what was approved for that application as well.
It's been moved and seconded, the recommendation. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Anyone against? One against. That is allowed. Thank you.